Plain Saturn Day for November 22nd, 2025. We're live on YouTube, DLive, and Twitter, and soon to be everywhere. I figured today, since it's November the 22nd, we should probably talk about the very significant hoax-aversary. And we just recently lived through a new iteration of the same basic myth, if you ask me. The killing of JFK is actually a myth, not a real event. It was a historic occurrence, which we accept is real because it's the state religion, media, and its myths are, quote, real. But it has no more claim than any other psyop we've looked at. It fits the same template. We often give Stanley Kubrick credit for directing it. I think John Frankenheimer deserves some credit as well. And I say this based upon Manchurian Candidate, which is his film. In fact, let me bring this up. We'll talk about John Frankenheimer. So we want to talk about John Frankenheimer, who drove RFK to the Ambassador Hotel, where he was killed by a mind-controlled assassin, just like his movie, which is the template, really, for the lone wolf assassin, which today the lone wolf assassin is the lone furry. But it's the same thing. Nothing's really changed. Everything's recycled. History definitely rhymes. And it repeats. Mark Twain said, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. It's kind of doing both. There's a lot of recycling going on. All right, so let's see here. I want to make sure everybody, yes, we're all on the same sheet. I see a group of you in the chat. And I'm going to hand out wrenches today. So if you're in the YouTube channel, infiniteplane.live, and you don't have a wrench, say hello and you'll be given moderator status, which means if you see somebody without a wrench and they're getting out of line, you have full authorization to abuse the power wisely and just, whack-a-mole, whack a troll. And if they really do deserve to be there, they'll contact me and we'll pull them out of the dungeon. But, shoot first, ask questions later. That's acceptable. In today's media climate, Ollie Goering, what a time to be alive. Yep. Donna Saltard says lone furry. Yeah, lone furry shooters. They said Thomas Crooks was a furry. Tyler Robinson's live-in girlfriend thing was also a furry. And I think this is absurd. Like, I want to say, first of all, if you're a furry, I fully understand that this doesn't represent cosplay. And furry is just like one style of it. And the furry thing has nothing to do with Antifa, leftist politics, or any of that stuff. Somehow it's got conflated. It's certainly not a satanic Nazi thing. But they've created this new villain. They phased out the poor white bowl cut MAGA shooter shooting up public schools because it didn't really affect Republicans because they don't care about public schools. And it was one of their guys. So they're not going to get mad about Nick Cruz. And there was a video of Nick Cruz in his underwear with the MAGA hat firing blanks in his backyard with a pistol. But now that the shooters are all left-wing, radicalized, Antifa, furries, shooting Christian schools, now the right wing cares. So this is a really good pivot, a really good plot twist. You got to give it to them, to the psyop entertainment complex. So no, I don't know. The furry thing isn't or it's not primarily a adult fetish thing. It's more like anime culture. Like for them, it's Halloween every day. It's really no different than goth, just brighter colors. We're just talking about subcultures, but somehow they've managed to merge these things. And so I see an image of Thomas Crooks, Trump's ear piercer, and then the image of Tyler Robinson, and then it said something about it was some alarmist stuff about furries, and I'm like, that looks like a wolf's mask that they're showing between them. And I thought this is intriguing because they used to call the shooters lone wolves, lone nut, lone wolf. But anyway, we're just talking about the recycled narratives. Like, was he shot from the front, the back? Who did it? Was it Israel? And they've recycled all of these narratives. Although right now, Candace Owens is taking it into some new terrain where she's suggesting that Charlie got shot. And these are all based on anonymous tips. She gets these anonymous tips and she claims that she's got her sources, and she's just getting trolled by people left and right. The tip about the Egyptian planes led back to the office where her attorneys worked. So I think she's being trolled pretty hard, but someone sent her a message and they claimed that there was an assassination team in France trained by Israel that took out Charlie, likely as a warning to her so she stops talking about the French president's wife, possibly being his uncle. Yeah, that's where she's at. It's one hell of a mind map. But, that's what we're supposed to perceive. Like, we're supposed to see Erica Kirk as shady and likely behind the assassination. We're also supposed to interpret the conspiracy theorist as apophenic, schizoid, a out-of-control grifter, exploiting the death of a friend. Like, we're supposed to think that conspiracy theorists are reprehensible. And they created this anti-conspiracy theorist rhetoric in the wake of JFK's assassination, where it was a pejorative. Oh, you don't believe the news? You're a conspiracy theorist. Well, now they have this actress, Candace Owens, living up to that archetype, to that conspiracy theorist who is, like Alex Jones, insensitive to the victims of the alleged events. Not to mention, she seems to be out there for attention. And then her connections are genuinely insane. All created on purpose. Plain Dakota says she's a dunce. No, she's actually not a dunce. She's portraying a dunce, a tinfoil dunce cap. And that's meant as an indirect attack on you. On those of you who don't trust mainstream media, who recognize lies coming from government-controlled news outlets, we're supposed to be lumped in with her. Oh, you don't think that the Tyler Robinson shot Charlie Kirk? Well, you have a tinfoil dunce cap and you listen to Candace Owens and you're gullible. Because now she's just looking gullible with her supposed tips. And I'm like, how is she an investigator? Like, what are these, what kind of access does she have? Like, she's just a regular podcaster and we're supposed to believe that she's got secret connections, people with high security clearances who are going to violate their NDAs to give her some tips. Same thing Alex Jones used to say, like, oh, my friends high up in the CIA told me that they all do DMT and talk to gnomes and elves. He literally talked about that. He literally talked about gnomes, elves, DMT, and his high-level military intelligence connections. It's just a way of saying that I don't have a source, so it's appealing to an authority. Ollie Goering says, yes, Guild of Writers really went there. They turned furries into bad guys in their dramas. Yeah, I think it's a joke. And I think that the lone wolf becoming lone furry is just typical of where they are right now. Like, we've just gone from this, like, sci-fi, not like a kind of, I guess you would say, spy thriller type of scenario with the mind-controlled assassin into this tragic comedy where this subgroup of people who dress up as animals get into leftist politics and shoot Christian conservatives to make political statements. But that story was engineered to be unbelievable to create the conspiracy theorists, because the mainstreamers are going to believe what they're told. So they want this division there because that's part of the system. The system is split in two. It's a duopoly, mainstream and alt-mainstream. And most people who are following Candace Owens are alt-mainstream. And they think that they are somehow closer to the truth. And at this point, it's just embarrassing. It's really embarrassing for them. I wouldn't want to be still in that camp thinking I'm somehow an alternative thinker because I reject the mainstream. No, the reason why Candace Owens is the #1 podcast is because this is slop. This is conspiracy slop for the masses. It's part of the bread and circuses, and it's a duopoly. Plain Decoded says, I wish the comedy was more of a Leslie Nielsen Naked Gun type. I haven't seen the new Naked Gun, and I meant to see it. And since Netflix pickpocketed me, I should probably check it out. I'm also considering, I don't know how overpriced it is, but I may go see the new Wizard of Oz for its predictive programming value. Although the antics of the two characters, the Ariana Grande and Cynthia, the way they act off stage is really bizarre. Like they're on ecstasy, some kind of raver drug, constantly just crying. And then they're very tactile, like gropey, very gropey. It almost looked menacing at times. So then Ariana Grande comes out and she says, "I've got COVID. I got COVID." And I'm like, okay, that's it. She needs some social distance from this gropey co-star. And I guess that's a way out. Like if somebody won't give you any personal space and you need some distance, just tell them you got COVID. Clockwork 113 says, "Yep, chum for the Sharks." Yeah, and we're past that. And we're not apologizing to them. We're not trying to gain their approval. Like, this is why you should believe us. This is why you shouldn't trust alt mainstream. Like, we shouldn't have to break it down to people. And so there's two groups of people that I'm referring to. One are the alt media. Like, that's embarrassing. And then there's this other group who have enough information to know better, but they're afraid to leave Trutherville. They're 1 foot in, 1 foot off world stage. And they're the ones who are like, it might be fake. It could be a squib. The whole thing looks fake, but it might be real. I don't know. And then they just like, I don't know. Who am I to know? And that's fine if you say that. Who am I to know? But too often they'll say, well, we don't know. We weren't there. It's like, don't include me in your bubble. I'm not part of your we. We have a different perspective. And if your perspective is mainstream, you can have ambiguity. You can say, I don't know, because you literally do not know. You're dependent on the truth being spoon-fed to you. So your default is just to be safe, keep 1 foot in the matrix. And so if you're still 1 foot in the matrix and ambiguous, you can't pretend like being ambiguous is an enlightened and open-minded perspective. Like it's closed-minded to take a stance. No, you should be able to determine if it's real or fake based on your own critical thinking faculties if they haven't taken those from you. And if you can't arrive at a conclusion, like I can definitively say he's dead, or no, this is totally fake. If you can't settle on one or the other, I would argue that's a place of moral cowardice, not willing to defend a stance. And I'm willing to defend my stance. When I say it's fake, I have a dozen plus hoax indicators. I have quite a lot for you to unpack if you want to say it was real. But if you're going to claim ambiguity, you can't claim it's open-mindedness, because you're not open-minded if your selection of choices, your selection of your various options, if they're all contained in the mainstream universe. That's not open-minded. By definition, that's closed-minded. It's like if it was true, it would have been on TV. Okay, you can stay there. Anonymous 3666 says, I am new here. Oh, Anonymous. Okay, well, if you're new here, there's a slight probationary period. And if you don't do any mainstream advocacy, then you will be permitted to remain. And you'll be gifted an 18-inch blue titanium wrench. And you can impress those who don't agree with us. Plain Dakota says, Candace Owens' podcast set looks like witchcraft. Yeah, she has her tacky CIA mugs and then her golden Catholic cross in the back. I think she's cosplaying. I really question if she actually has any children. Like, has she even been photographed? And then I look at these children by Erica Kirk and Charlie Kirk, and it's like those are either AI kids or they're rented. Like they're just borrowed. Charlie Kirk is so awkward with those kids, and they look terrified of him. Like he doesn't know what he's doing. And honestly, I think that they are a totally made-up family. I mean, why would they be real? Consider this. The available evidence suggests that the Charlie Kirk assassination was scheduled to appear on our news. Our history is written in advance. And in this particular case, we pegged it back at 1998 at the latest. I'm thinking mid-90s. Snake Eyes comes out. So the script for the psyop that was performed on September 10th, 2025 was written 27 years ago. long before the Charlie Kirk that we grew to know and see on South Park and then we saw get killed, long before that guy took that role, Erica Kirk similarly would have been conscripted into the role. Maybe the role was in her agenda as early as 2012, which you could ascertain from that music video, Emerson Drive, She's My Kind of Crazy. So in other words, this was always a role. Same with the fake friendship with Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens. And if you look at their videos where they're hanging out and singing into the phone and dancing awkwardly, it looks like Friends, like the intro to Friends. It looks so phony and fake. But anyway, given it's all a construct, there's no reason to think that these two participants actually procreated. They were renting those kids from some government daycare, or if they were even real. There's no reason to think that they actually had kids. I do not believe that Charlie Kirk and Erica Kirk had any children together. It's ridiculous to assume this to be the case, knowing what we know about it. That's why we have to ask additional questions. If he was squibbed, then, and when we start going down that path, you see, okay, this event is historically significant. It was planned long ago, and it has a number of agendas attached to it. And this family, the Kirk family, is totally a construct. So given this, well, then those kids are obviously not theirs. All right, moving on. So today is the anniversary of the squibbing of JFK. JFK's death was fake. Israel didn't do it. It wasn't done by a mind-controlled assassin. It was, if anybody shot him, it wasn't Oswald. It was Stanley Kubrick. Maybe John Frankenheimer. John Frankenheimer certainly shot RFK. And by this, I mean on video. They shot the video of the fake event that was broadcast later. Well, with JFK, it wasn't even broadcast. Plaintiff Kid says those kids came from a Minneapolis fake body store. I have an article in my blog, Robots That Bleed. If you go to timosman.substack, and Robots That Bleed is a reference to these hyper-realistic simulation training dolls. Some of them do speak. Some do bleed. You can find wearable parts, like you can wear an arm that's just basically got a squib built into it. They're so realistic with this stuff that they probably got those kids. There's like overstock, like leftover from 10/7. Like, hey, we need some fake, some fake kids. You ever notice? I mean, I was watching that after 10/7. I see like 30 kids on the sidewalk, like sardines laid out there. Oh, these kids were killed by the bomb. I'm like, well, why are their eyes and mouths closed? And why aren't they mangled? Like, what kind of bomb can kill a bunch of kids and not even take a limb off? Like, they don't look like they were bombed. It's because those were dolls. And yeah, in all likelihood, these were dolls. Slightly animatronic. Anonymous says, I never considered JFK assassination was fake. It looks so real. Well, one rule here is that looking real is not evidence it was real. Everything on TV looks real. Go to a magic show, sit in your seat, and every trick will look real. Does it mean it's magic? No. You wouldn't know it was fake unless you got out of your seat. And you wouldn't know the JFK assassination was fake unless you get out of the seat, the perspective that they want you to take. And that perspective is they are an authoritative source, and what you see from what their magician is directing you to look at, rather, but what you're seeing from your seat is the truth. And as we proceed, I mean, it was never a good idea to say, oh, if it's fake, we're going to be able to tell by watching the news. No, you're not going to be able to look at the video and make the case it was fake. That is a bad methodology. It will not work anymore. AI is getting too good. Video effects are so over. I mean, you can do it with fake space, I suppose. But generally speaking, the media fakery is so good that don't think you're going to be able to say it looked fake on TV, because it's not going to be the case. The reason you arrive at the conclusion it's fake is you look at the wider context. So when it comes to the JFK thing, in all likelihood, I'm thinking it was a squib. But look how many shooters they said. Oh, it was the driver. No, it was one of the Secret Service. No, Jackie shot him. Grassy Knoll from the sewer. Like, they have all these different potential shooters, Umbrella Man, no different than Candace Owens, who drew attention to all these guys in red shirts in the audience. And it's some like school spirit thing. But she's like, that's them. Right. Like the conspirators are going to wear uniforms and give you hand signs. But just like JFK, CK has all kinds of misdirection. Like, oh, is this person? It was that person. All these conspiracies are deliberately engineered. They're placed there for those who don't trust the mainstream. They will not lead to the truth. The truth is they don't kill people in psyops. But they need you to believe that the person's dead. It's actually too outside of the realm of possibility if your perspective is guardrailed by mainstream parameters. The Overton window opens up a little bit to maybe consider a second shooter scenario, but they never let it go so far as to consider the event was completely staged and fabricated. Yeah, another thing too, Ribo Nation, the Zapruder film wasn't even released until 75. Yeah, nobody even saw it until Geraldo Rivera put it on TV like 12 years later. So if you have relatives who say, I was watching on TV when JFK got it, it wasn't like that. And then you had Conan O'Brien was talking to Buzz Aldrin, and he's like, I remember when I was a kid, my parents woke me up and they said, hey, come downstairs and watch the moon landing. And I saw it. And Buzz Aldrin's like, no, you didn't. You didn't see it. And Conan's like, what? He's like, you saw an animation. Because if you didn't know, there wasn't a camera man on the moon to catch the landing. They showed you a concurrently released timed animation so you could guess, or rather understand where it was at that moment. It was like plotting it. When people say I remember, I automatically think, okay, what are they confabulating? But if you never considered the assassination was fake, why would you have? Is my point. Because your entire knowledge base, like if you think like AI has whatever programming goes into it, your knowledge base doesn't include that. Your knowledge base includes Lee Harvey Oswald and second shooter conspiracy theories, which are considered to be off limits and wrong. But your knowledge base does not include the possibility it was faked. And our perspective includes media fakery. So you have the mainstream and alt media perspectives, and it's a closed system. And that's where everyone is by default. But the perspective inclusive of media fakery and the use of media in creating fake historic events, that's not even included in your curriculum. You're never going to encounter this. And the fact that you're here is interesting because we're the only ones who have this perspective. Truthers will act like they are somehow the alternative, but they're not if they're not looking at the world stage as a fictional universe. The entire body of mainstream and alternative media reportage is contained within a fictional universe. Anonymous says, now the moon landing I can tell was fake. Sure. Rear screen projection, totally fakeable. I heard this ridiculous notion. This is actually a popular talking point where they'll say, it would have been easier in 1969 to have gone to the moon than to have faked it with cameras. And then you show them science fiction from the 60s. It's like, no. The science fiction from the 60s looked better than Apollo 11. King Ravana says, Cash P says Thomas Crooks acted alone. He acted, that's for sure. He played the role. Although we didn't really see him. We just saw pictures of him. But that's the thing. The mainstream, Lee Harvey Oswald, acted alone. But they deliberately create ambiguous scenarios so critical thinkers don't believe this. They create the appearance of a cover-up. All by design. The thing itself is fake. But you might be able to say, okay, the moon landing was fake. Well, what about the space station? The space station looks way faker, especially when they use augmented reality and they goof up. I mean, there's a blooper reel of space station glitches that are hilarious. And I don't focus on it as much. They create these ad hoc explanations for everything. And you're talking to people who have faith in media and what they see on the screen. And you're not going to talk them out of their miracles. You see, there's myths like what we see on the world stage, fake events. 9/11 is a contemporary myth. These are historic events, but they're actually fake. These are essentially myths. But the space stuff falls into the category of miracles. Even the levitating astronauts, it's all miracles. It's showing that their magic is real, that this is the real religion, this is the real paradigm to have. But it's essentially mythology and religious pageantry. Ribo Nation says they have to silence the assassins as quickly as possible. Case closed. Yeah, I want to look into that. I think there's some lore behind this. The idea of the mind-controlled assassin put forth in Manchurian Candidate and, Catcher in the Rye, always their book. But you have all these mentally ill shooters. And the reason why the right wing or the conspiracy theorists will always say it was a false flag is because, or they'll say the shooter was on antidepressants. It doesn't make sense. Why does the right wing say, well, the shooter was on SSRIs? Why would SSRIs cause somebody to be a mass shooter? It makes no sense. The reason they do that is because the conspiracy theory is that you can tell somebody's a mind-controlled assassin if they're under the control of psychiatrists who are using MK Ultra on them, so that they go serve a purpose and then be killed so they can't talk. But I was reading about the Hashishans, the idea of the assassins, that the whole concept of a modern assassination having been a set of skills that were merged with the Knights Templar. And there's this lore behind this idea, though, of the old man in the mountain. This idea of this cult where they would give the initiates hashish, get them really high or something. Anyway, the idea was mind-controlled assassins started back then, where you could have these political assassins who were just really high and under mind control, convinced that they had been to paradise, and then they had to fulfill this mission to return. There's some background to this storyline that I want to revisit here. But the Manchurian Candidate was a mind-controlled assassin story. And then you had Saran shooting RFK, mind-controlled assassin. And again, he was driven to the hotel where he was killed. RFK was driven there to the ambassador by John Frankenheimer, director of the Manchurian Candidate. And at the time, they cited Manchurian Candidate and Suddenly, two Sinatra films, as being an influence on Lee Harvey Oswald. And they did cite the fact he had a copy of Catcher in the Rye in his hotel room. All props. Anyway, getting back to the JFK thing. So we mentioned John Frankenheimer. That's an important piece. And by the way, the JFK stuff was brought up all around the time of the Charlie Kirk thing. So Charlie Kirk gets shot. And at the same time, Charlie, because he's on his America Comeback Tour, Charlie is on his comeback tour, Charlie Sheen. Charlie Sheen is on JRE, and they're talking about JFK. He even talks about getting sniped by some projectile thrown at him when he was in a theater. Charlie Sheen is talking about getting sniped. It hits him in the head, and Joe Rogan says it was a great shot. So they're talking about JFK, Lee Harvey Oswald, the advent of the term conspiracy theorist. Charlie talks about getting sniped, and they say, oh, Charlie Kirk just got shot. So I thought that's interesting. You have Charlie on his comeback tour same day, and they got JFK in the conversation. Then Roger Stone comes out, and he says, Charlie Kirk just messaged me and said he wanted to do a podcast about the JFK assassination. So that's another one. And we were seeing a number of these comparisons to JFK, especially in the conspiracy theories. Was he shot from the front or the back? All this stuff has been repeated. And then lately, someone sent me this thing. It was a video of Erica Kirk and her college football days. And she's talking about being a beauty pageant model and a basketball player. And she's wearing 11, and the player that she's stealing the ball from is 22. So you got 11, 22 right there on the jerseys. A JFK reference. And then later, she's compared to Jackie Kennedy for the way that she handled the corpse and wanted people to see. Like Jackie shows up in the bloody dress to the inauguration of LBJ. And then some actress wore a bloody Jackie Kennedy dress for Halloween. Who was that? It was totally viral. So we're talking about John Frankenheimer, metascriptor. And this is, again, part of a pattern. We're just noting how even back with the JFK assassination, you had all the same hallmarks of it being a hoax. Ribo Nation says, you got to watch Executive Action 1973, a film about rogue intelligence agents conspiring to kill JFK. Well, okay, so speaking of a conspiracy to kill JFK, I mean, there was a movie he made. JFK and Jackie Kennedy participated in a home movie on September 22nd, 1963. There's an article in Vanity Fair called Why JFK Staged His Own Murder in a James Bond-inspired spy movie. So there was a weekend, September 21st, 22nd, 1963. This is in Vanity Fair, where Jackie Kennedy and JFK and some Secret Service agents staged his assassination. They basically made a home movie where he gets killed, like they were rehearsing or something. They used Heinz ketchup. He was apparently covered in Heinz ketchup lying in the foyer, playing dead. And one of the Secret Service agents who helped them with this home movie was there at the assassination date. So it's a never before seen home movie. For some reason, they didn't release it. It came out last year. Vanity Fair reported on it, and they showed a couple of shots that looked like they were from the Zapruder film of the Ford Lincoln. Very strange thing. So here's an excerpt from the Vanity Fair article. The First Lady made an unusual request. She explained, and this is the Secret Service agent. It goes on. First of all, it says that she was really into the visual arts. So apparently Jackie Kennedy was really into film. She made an unusual request. She wanted to make a short film, a spy movie, and asked if the agents wouldn't mind participating. They hurriedly drove up to the main house, and they had to react as though they'd heard shots. So they enter the house, and they find the president lying on the floor in the foyer with ketchup smeared all over him. Jackie's on the staircase directing the action. And then there's a few still shots from this home movie where they're running up to the house and they find him dead. So it was sort of done in a prankish way to get their real reactions to seeing the president dead on the ground. So how do you categorize that? Predictive programming, foreknowledge. Anonymous says, what do you think the motive to fake the assassination was? The assassination has multiple purposes, but one of them is our history isn't organic. Like, it's not just a record of what the news reports every day, because the news media is serving government with this ulterior motive of curating our collective worldview. And by curating it, it's about what they focus on. So they don't have to fake everything, but it's mainly our history is a construct. So what happens to the news every day? Like, what is yesterday's news? At what point does it become history? So if you recognize that there's a continuity, that news becomes history. Well, at what point is it history? Well, yesterday's news is history. So then when you include into your worldview, when you factor into it, pre-planned historically significant events that direct the entire news cycles of global media, well, you're talking about proactively creating historic events. In other words, in addition to curating the worldview through its selectivity of focus, it also manufactures events. And these historically significant events are put there to keep us in the same worldview. So, for example, after the 9/11 event, now we're in the war on terror era. Now there's this new threat, and they have these new solutions that must be implemented. So we're talking about a monopoly on media that allows media globally, that government globally, to use media to put us all into a singular worldview. So it's the same objective that religions have. Every religion tries to put its worldview, its holy book, over everybody's mind so we're all on the same sheet. But they've all failed to reach global consensus. But guess what hasn't failed? Media. Media has succeeded where religion has failed. And every one of these major events serves to put us all on the same sheet. And these are major guideposts, plot twists. These are the events that go into the history books as historically significant. So any assassination falls into this category. Any major terror attack, any major event that not only captivates the news cycles, but everything bounces off of it. These things are faked for that reason. It's reality control. And there's numerous other objectives behind every one of these events. I mean, you go down the list, usually it is about increased control over information, media, power. It's always consolidation. But with the JFK thing, it's also, I believe, part of it is trauma, drama. If you look at the psychology of interpersonal manipulation, we're looking at psychological warfare being waged against the masses. And these events have an impact on people. When you have the back and forth or cycle of highs and lows, you know, put them in a low point, then bring them to a high point, that's addictive. That's an addictive cycle. It's actually called trauma bonding, where if you intermittently give people really good news, but then you constantly hammer them with bad news, what happens is the good news gives them a huge spike, and then they forget the bad stuff. But the intermittent reinforcement, the ups and downs, it creates a very strong bond between the consumers of news and the manufacturers of it. But going on here, I would even say the moon landing was even more significant, because the moon landing put everybody in the world on the same sheet. It also validates all the official science that led up to it. It validates the cosmography, obviously. I mean, whatever you think about NASA and whatever they're fabricating versus what's real, something like the moon landing gives ultimate credibility to the dominant paradigm. Like, they basically created a paradigm shift for everybody. Like, this is the world, and we're all on it. The blue marble did this even more, and we got to take care of it because it's finite, and it's obviously suffering from an affliction of looks like a humanity outbreak. Ever since they showed us the blue marble, the environmentalists have been making the case that mankind is destroying the earth, like we're termites or tumors or a virus. All right, let's continue here. So we're talking more about who in the entertainment realm is involved with the faking of these events, because these events are not just isolated hoaxes. Each one would necessarily require police, the cooperation with the media, the politicians, the hospitals. I mean, there's a number of entities and agencies involved with every simulated event. And these simulated events, I don't use the word fake news as much, because fake news has been co-opted to just, if it's Democrat news, it's fake. If it's conspiracy theory, it's fake. The word fake has lost all meaning. We're talking about simulated events, which give total creative control over the authors of our history. So we do have real history. Like, we all live in the real world. It's objectively real. However, every so often, you have events that are superimposed over the reality. You have this merging of real and fake. No different than living with a liar. Like, if you ever been around a liar and you were gullible or you were trusting, and if you trust a liar for years, well, what happens? Well, you live in an alternate universe where the things they're doing aren't really happening. Blind spots. You know, people find out, like, Who the Bleep Did I Marry? Is that TV show? Well, a skilled liar can put you into what I would consider to be a false reality. And collectively, we have been lulled by lies into a false reality. Media is a liar. but it's a good liar. It doesn't lie with every breath. It lies strategically to those who have its trust. And this isn't a controversial thing to suggest because religions have already mastered the art of lying to the masses. Forget intentions. If you're spreading myths as real, technically you're a liar if your argumentation is rooted in logical fallacies. And we have to be more comfortable calling liars liars. And if you don't want to be called a liar, then don't lie. You can believe what you want, but when you try to assert your belief is real without any evidence, that's some witchcraft, voodoo magic. Like, lying is a form of magic. It's black magic. It's reality altering for the people who believe the lies. And if you're trying to alter somebody's reality and perceptions, you're doing magic. And the lie world order is built on nothing but a magic show. So it's a magic show, not a snuff show. The JFK thing was a trick. Charlie Kirk's bleeding neck wound, yeah, it was a magic trick. It's not a snuff film. And we have reasons for saying so. So we're talking about John Frankenheimer and his role in the JFK assassination, Stanley Kubrick. So by the way, Stanley Kubrick releases, well, he had a screening of Dr. Strangelove on 11/22/63. And because of the JFK assassination, they delayed it. Now, this is interesting because if you look at his movie release dates, there's usually these weird JFK connections. Like JFK Jr. dies 7/16/1999. Eyes Wide Shut's released 7/16/1999. And then you have 7/16/1969. Apollo 11 launches from the Kennedy Space Center. So that you have this interesting Kennedy-Kubrick connection that goes back. Some breakdowns would even suggest, and I agree with this, that Full Metal Jacket's character Joker is based on JFK, which explains all the innuendos and JFK assassination jokes and the target on the side of the helmet. So Dr. Strangelove, Kubrick film, 11/22/63, it was delayed. But not only was it delayed, they removed scenes that they thought would be insensitive. So they delayed it because they said it was going to be insensitive because of the event that had occurred. But there were a couple of scenes in there that they removed. One of them was a character said, a fella could have a pretty good weekend in Dallas. And then there was a pie throwing scene. And somebody said, quote, our beloved president has been struck down in his prime. So the reference to the president being struck down, the pie throwing, and the great weekend in Dallas was removed because of the JFK assassination, and the film was delayed because of the assassination. This is a reoccurring theme where movies released at the same time are altered as the result. Collateral Damage is one. Megalopolis is another. Then you even have things like the marketing materials for Donnie Darko, released 1/19/2001, were altered because the 9/11 foreshadowing contained therein. This has been a recurring theme, and it goes back to the JFK assassination, if not before. And that's what we're going into the nuance here. But so again, they delay it and they alter stuff. It's an interesting part of this pattern, though, and it's predictable for the most part. If it's fake, you're going to see concurrently released movies that reference the event. That's what we call concurrent programming. So, for example, the Hulu show, The Tempest, came out on 9/10, the same day Charlie Kirk was shot. Episode 1 has a character in a church, leader of the Youth Republicans, getting shot in the exact part of the neck. So on the day of Kirk's shooting, a corresponding character was shot, and Kirk had been there in South Korea where the movie was filmed 4 days before, speaking to the Youth Republicans. So he was in the shoes of his movie counterpart, speaking to the real world counterpart of the Youth Republicans. And they prayed for him. And then 4 days later, anyway, that show has the focus really about the widow who takes over the group, fakes her crying on TV. I mean, the Hulu, The Tempest, the whole show, The Tempest from Hulu, Disney Hulu, this show really foreshadowed, and we talked about it the day after, actually. It was like 9/11. I went through those 4 episodes, and it foreshadowed everything Erica Kirk has done since. And then Heads of State, which comes out 2025, is about VP Kirk. So this is just an example here how even during the Kennedy assassination, the day of, you had something screening by Kubrick, a major director, that foreshadowed the event that was eerily prescient or coincidental. Lord Laney says, besides the meta-scripting, Collateral Damage was a good movie. Well, we'll never know what it was in its original form because they pulled out the scenes that foreshadowed 9/11 and terrorist attacks, planes flying into buildings. They altered Collateral Damage. But the reason it came to my attention is that the billboards for that movie were at ground zero and caught in footage in one of the handheld cams where the explosion is viewed on the building. Well, you see Arnold Schwarzenegger looking over ground zero. And the movie was delayed and then changed, just like this. So we talked about the home movie of JFK and Jackie Kennedy faking his death 2 months before. Dr. Strangelove released the same day, altered because of it. John Frankenheimer and his connections to the Kennedys. I noticed people were comparing Lee Harvey Oswald to Tyler Robinson, similar demeanor. Oh, that reminds me. I put out an article in, I think it was April of 2024, where I said, enter Oswald. And I put together all the different situations, and it wasn't just movies, but every instance where Lee Harvey Oswald was suddenly being mentioned. Like, why is Oswald being mentioned everywhere? I even heard, I mean, so I was looking at all the various instances of that particular character just showing up in, for example, when Robert Crimo shot up the 4th of July parade, the guy with the 47 tattooed on his head, right where Trump has the 47. Well, Robert Crimo had a Lee Harvey Oswald newspaper article on his wall, and he was the sniper, and he's the one who shot at the parade. So when I saw that, I said, Oswald has entered the world stage, like they're putting him out there. And then the following Super Bowl, Brock Purdy, the quarterback of the 49ers, was weirdly connected to Lee Harvey Oswald, where people in the media were asking him if he was aware of how much he looked like Lee Harvey Oswald. And he acted like it was absurd, like he was clueless about it. But I brought this up because it was the timing of it. Then you had a horror version of Disney's Oswald that was released, and it had this scary skull-faced bunny named Oswald. And I thought that likely could have been a link to the Donnie Darko character, which ties into Trump. This whole movie does, the Donnie Darko movie. But I'm sticking to the Lee Harvey Oswald stuff. Leave the World Behind. We mentioned that one because it came out on 11/22, and the zip code in the movie has 1963 in it. Then you had that winter solstice. There was a shooter in Prague, a sniper, and there were reports that there was blood all over the steps. And the same day, pro-Hamas protesters dumped blood on the Lincoln Memorial steps. So we were just noting snipers in the news, references to Oswald, and it was building up. And this was back in April. And I said, whatever plot twist comes next, we have many allusions to Lee Harvey Oswald with connections to a head wound theme and the number 47. So I was just inferring from all these mentions of Oswald and the number 47 and a head wound that Trump was about to get it. And this was just a few months before the event in Butler. And what we're describing here is what is commonly referred to as predictive programming. And I would define that as akin to product placement, not for products, but for future events or future people, characters on the world stage. Or they characterize existing characters with corresponding actors in movies playing roles that are meant to be associated with these. And this is a very common phenomenon. And what's notable here is it's not just art imitating life. It's not like these directors are like, hey, let's embody some Donald Trump into this villain. It's not that, because the examples that we cite as predictive of future fake events contain foreshadowing for these fake events. And it's a common denominator in every appearance of these corresponding characters, where they are all used to foreshadow the same incoming event. So all this foreshadowing is conditioning. It's also, I think, the misinformation effect, where you have so much in your knowledge base of this event, movies, movie references, that it makes you, in a way, it frames how you perceive the event and the various characters in it. But they get you to rehearse the events that will be internalized into your mental simulation of events that they give you. So we're prepared long in advance. And that's why I mentioned the Charlie Kirk thing was scheduled at least 27 plus years in advance. So it wasn't just about him. It's about the historically significant assassination of the leader of this group and the various plot twists that occurred based on this. And there's a few things that have come up, but one of the things that really stood out to me is when I first heard of Turning Point USA, I connected it to the Turner Diaries. The Turner Diaries is considered, and in all the various white nationalist terror attacks, it's usually the case, they have the book by their bed. But the Turner Diaries is about this white nationalist Christian revolution against the New World Order, when the New World Order comes to take the guns. And the Turner Diaries features a scene where the main character, Earl Turner, flies a plane into the Pentagon and he becomes a martyr. So the leader of the org, which is what they call themselves, the leader of the org is martyred. And he is then, I guess it was a plane full of nukes into the Pentagon. But anyway, after this, he's considered a martyr, but then the revolution kicks off. So that they called that the turning point. So the turning point for USA, the turning point in the Turner Diaries, the book that motivated Timothy McVeigh, who was radicalized in Waco, but it gave him the inspiration for the Oklahoma City bombings. The turning point for this revolution was the martyrdom of their leader. So when Kirk dies, the next day, 9/11, all the truthers are saying, that is Charlie Kirk's people, the people around him, are saying, this is the turning point. This is the turning point in history where Western civilization was saved because of Charlie's sacrifice. If you remember all that rhetoric, it was all about it being the turning point. And that's not a coincidence. And then a couple years before, on 9/11, I think it was 9/11/23, on Netflix, they released something called Turning Point. And it was these soldiers, and it had the shadows, looked like the Twin Towers. So they chose these dates symbolically. And for them to say turning point upon his death, it's a reference to that book. And that book has everything to do with right-wing nationalism. Conscious Reality says, I don't know if there's any significant meaning to these numbers and what's happening, but Utah's the 45th state, but celebrates 1847 for the arrival of the pioneers led by Brigham Young. Interesting. It may. It very well may. These numbers all have great significance. Ian Creed says, Charlie, 33 days before being shot, said in an event he likes pancakes over waffles. I think it's a reference to dividing or squaring the circle, the waffle. Didn't Trump call him a master builder? Conscious Reality says it's called Days of 47. We'll have to look into that. And there's a movie out now called The Long Walk. Stephen King, who wrote The Shining. He's a meta scripter for sure. But in The Long Walk, it's about this morbid game or game show where people go walk on the road and they have to stay above 3 miles per hour. If they fall behind it or they falter, they get shot by the soldiers who are basically it's like a death march. And the story is told from the perspective of number 47. So Stephen King's out there wearing this gold necklace that has 47 on it. And he's walking down a road. And I think the message is dead man walking. Like, I think that these are symbolic things. And people say, well, I can't reference Trump because the book came out in the late 70s. Yeah, obviously, from the mainstream world stage perspective, it's merely a coincidence. It couldn't possibly mean anything. But if you look at the body of content predicting the emergence of Trump, it goes back at least as far as 1958 with specificity. But when we look at the examples of Trump-esque characters in movies foreshadowing the fake events, it's always 9/11 or Butler, Pennsylvania, 7/13. Consistent. Super Mario Brothers, King Koopa, based on Trump. Twin Towers get dissolved. Machete, 2010, Robert De Niro, Senator McLaughlin. Trump-esque character, ranting against immigrants when he gets shot at the podium. But the thing is, that's Robert De Niro foreshadowing who Trump was going to be 14 years later. It bore no resemblance to Trump in 2010. That's what I'm pointing out, that the movie representations that are involved in foreshadowing the psyops, the fake events that are foreshadowed in the movies, in these cases that we've examined, it's not even plausible to say that they were just copying a real world character. That these are just directors who are getting inspiration from the mainstream or from celebrities or no. That's not exactly how it's working. What's happening here is that the psyop is scheduled long in advance. So the Butler, Pennsylvania would necessarily have been scheduled at least as far back as 2010. At least. I would say further, and we could delve into that. I think we can maybe even go back, I don't know, maybe even Taxi Driver. How far back was Butler, Pennsylvania on the map? The 1958 trackdown had the Trump character building the wall, also to protect the people against a cosmic threat, which suggests Space Force, and he gets arrested. So 58 years later, he's president, but then it wasn't until 7 years after that he was arrested. So that was significant foreshadowing. I mean, 65 years plus. But again, the Butler, Pennsylvania thing would have been necessarily scheduled at least 2010. And you can look at the psyop reinforcement content in the entertainment realm as an indicator of how far back. And we have to look at all of the available examples and then examine the common denominators and then trace it back. And that's why I'm confident saying Charlie Kirk's thing was scheduled back 27 years. We're talking about news bending, but long term. So history bending. All right, moving on. I also want to do a in-depth look at the Luigi Mangione character as he connects to the Joker. There's some fascinating things here with this. The green skin of the witch in the Antifa-coded Wicked, where they black out the Emerald City, Seattle, EMP, and the Green Beret, who blew up the Cybertruck outside the Trump Tower. And then you had Luigi in SNL, who tried to kill Wario, played by Elon Musk, with a turtle shell. But the green hair, the green skin, the green beret, Joker, Luigi. What's the connection here? Well, it gets pretty deep, but it ties into class warfare, Joker, kill the rich, but it gets even deeper when you look at how the Joker has inspiration from the taxi driver character Travis Bickle, who inspired the quote real life shooting of Ronald Reagan. So you have Robert De Niro playing the character who inspired a president getting shot. He plays a role that foreshadows Trump getting shot. And then in the Joker, he gets shot on TV by the Joker. So you have instances of Robert De Niro's character as assassin and assassinated, connected through this certain character, the Joker, who has connections to Luigi. And then Luigi is certainly, I would say, the basis for, but it's not really possible if you look at the timelines, but he's the same essential character as the actor in Mickey 17. When I saw the Mickey 17 trailer, I see this character with a hoodie and a smile. I'm like, that looks like Luigi. Well, he's the one who shoots the Trump character, played by Mark Ruffalo. In Mickey 17, came out the year that Trump was shot. Interestingly, Mark Ruffalo's birthday is 11/22. And when he gets shot by the Luigi-like character, he demands the camera crew look at him so he can flex in front of the camera with blood dripping down his cheek. Sound familiar? For a movie filmed 2 years before, it sure has a lot of specificity with how it foreshadowed Butler, Pennsylvania. And Mark Ruffalo, it should be noted, like Robert De Niro, is Trump deranged. You can hear his own statements. You can see him at protests, no kings. He's Trump deranged. So you also find this common denominator of these Trump deranged actors and directors are involved in psyop reinforcement content for the Trump shooting. Not insignificant. It's all about characterizing the actors on the world stage in these events. And by the way, Dennis Hopper, who played Trump as King Koopa in Super Mario Brothers, his death day was 5/29, which is JFK's birthday. And John Hinckley, who was inspired by Robert De Niro as the Joker and shot the Reagan, his birthday is JFK's birthday, 5/29. You can also add to this 7/13, Trump's shooting day, is the birthday of Harrison Ford, who's in Captain America, Brave New World, where he's at the podium as the president and he gets shot at and he has to jump down to the ground. That came out the day before Trump was shot, and they altered the trailer like they alter the movies. They altered the trailer because it was too close to Trump getting shot. And of course, Harrison Ford becomes the Red Hulk. So that's another Hulk character. Mark Ruffalo is the Green Hulk, Hulk Hogan. There's some Hulk stuff that was consistent throughout here that we were kind of noting. Okay, now 7/13 is also the birthday of Julius Caesar. And Julius Caesar in the Park, 2017, portrayed Donald Trump as Julius Caesar getting stabbed, getting killed on the stage, getting assassinated. And Laura Loomer jumped on the stage and interrupted the play. They should have arrested her for that. But she interrupted it because they were killing Trump. Donna Southhart says, no coincidence. So there's no coincidences on the world stage. So what happened, this is the formula, because we're talking about tracing back how far these various characters or events were planned to go onto our timeline. So we have our timeline, and then I call it the meta script. The meta script would be the program. It would be all of the fake events that are going to be inserted onto the real timeline. So every day of news goes by, becomes history, but every day of news also, unquestionably, mainstream will accept every fake event as real. So the scripted events are superimposed onto our shared consensus version of things. And what we're getting at here is that every one of these events has certain common traits, such as foreshadowing or predictive programming, concurrent programming, the stuff that happens at the same time, And then you have, in addition to the concurrent stuff, you have a lot of what I'd call psyop reinforcement, or after the fact. So you have the before, the during, the after. The reinforcement stuff is going to be the echo chamber, everybody acting like it's real, where they're just like, it's like blunt force hacking. Like, it's not even that sophisticated in this sense. They just flood the zone. We've had nothing but Charlie Kirk conspiracy theories from Candace Owens, top podcast in the world, for 35 days straight. That's all just reinforcing that the event happened. So they really have to drill these things home. And by the way, in addition to the foreshadowing, concurrent programming, and psyop reinforcement, you also have drills. So this is an important point to make, because people will say, well, these directors are just inspired and they're just artists. They're just channeling the zeitgeist. Okay, you might have that excuse, but it's flimsy. Because if you include the fact that there are drills that emulate the event, well, then who inspired the drills? The same people doing the drills are executing the fake event, are also responsible for this predictive or prescient or eerily coincidental content. But the drills are an important facet. So what I'm pointing out here, though, is that by looking at the foreshadowing content and everything else, you can kind of determine how far back the event itself was written. Like, so this metascript looks like, so here we are, we're in 2025. They probably have fake events scheduled out to 2055. Like, they already know. That plane crash in Kentucky was preceded by a drill, as we predicted it would be. 150 mass casualty actors. But the concurrent stuff is interesting because it includes movies, video games, podcasts, even sports. You had Alejandro Kirk in the news, the same time Kirk is in the news. And they're like, oh, he's a pain in the neck. And they dump Gatorade on him. It looks like it's blood squirting out of his neck. Then his bat breaks, last ball thrown in the World Series, at the neck. But you do find that like Charlie Sheen, his comeback on 9/10 on JRE, talking about JFK during the American Comeback Tour. So there's this echo chamber where every possible propaganda vector is activated. And they're all pushing the same basic things, which are memes. It's essentially memes. Meme warfare. This is an information war. Psy-war, mind war, psychological warfare, it's information. It's an information war. And the information is hitting the demographics that are being targeted with the fake event from every possible angle. But if you don't know there's a common source, it looks like coincidence. And you're trained, you're conditioned as a mainstream media consumer, you're trained to see patterns and coincidences as ignorable. So yeah, they'll acknowledge it's a coincidence. We'll say it's just a coincidence. Well, no, there's no just a coincidence on the world stage. When you watch a movie, it's not just a coincidence when there's a plot twist and the character finds the talisman he needs, or he meets the person that he needs. Like, these aren't coincidences. They're in a script. So when we're talking about the world stage, we're talking about the world as broadcast, that the consensus accepts as real, as augmented by the metascript. The metascript is what augments our collective worldview. And it's through a process of conditioning, and then the real-time echo chamber, and then the reinforcement. So predictive programming, concurrent programming, and then reinforcement programming. And this is standard operating procedure for every single fake event. And by fake event, again, we're not talking about localized hoaxes that influence a news cycle. No, we're talking about significant historical events, because the ones who control government and media maintain their cohesive control over our collectively agreed upon worldview by taking a great deal of artistic license when it comes to the events of the world events. Diana says drills come before events. Let me add to that. The London subway bombings, were preceded by, the BBC had a show about terror attacks in a subway. On the day of the subway bombings, there were 2 subways, 2 trains that were bombed, 2 tracks. And on that day, there were drills in the exact tunnels that were bombed. And these were bombing drills. Christchurch massacre, 2 different mosques shot. There were drills going on that day. Bomb drills, drills for knocking somebody out of the car in a pit maneuver, pulling them out. And the guys doing a drill for pit maneuvers pulled the shooter out of his car. So the drills are often the same day. 9/11 had 88 drills for terror attacks on that day. The day of Parkland, they mentioned, oh no, this was a real shooting. The drill was earlier. So generally the drills are concurrent with it or at the same time. When the with that flight, AA flight that hit the, was it a Black Hawk? Yeah, when the Black Hawk helicopter got hit, the one with the female pilot, so the right said it was DEI and the left said it was Trump and Musk and their cuts to government. That was done during a continuity of government drill for evacuating VIPs in the case of a nuke attack. During a drill. So no, generally it's real time. So how are these drills mysteriously always happening at the same time as fake events? Well, what's the difference between a drill and a fake event? They're the same thing. The drill is nothing more than a simulated event. They call them mass casualty simulations. But what's the difference between a mass casualty simulation and a terror attack or a mass shooting? Well, the media designates one real. The one they report on is called real. They designate it real. That's the difference. Ian Creed says, imagine what the letter agencies learned by mass studying memes throughout the 2010s to now they have meta control. Yeah, especially now that every keystroke has been recorded. Your every thought, your every search. There's no reason to think that any of your data is private. That's ridiculous. That's naive. By the way, Netflix bought all your DMs and your search history if you're a Facebook user. They bought that stuff. They are target marketing psyops. They know everything. And you look at Netflix. I call it Planet Netflix because they're so good at concurrent programming. I mean, I guess the most recent one was No Kings protests, and the crown jewels are stolen from the Louvre. And then Netflix's show Lupin has the character raiding the Louvre, and he steals Marie Antoinette's necklace. And of course, she lost her head during a No Kings protest. This is a common thing, like Netflix predicting. But they know who their target market is. They've done a really in-depth study. And Netflix's founder or co-founder and first CEO was related to Edward Bernays and Sigmund Freud. So if you cross Bernays, who really wrote about the father of public relations, the father of PR stunts, about changing mass behavior by treating us as a mass entity, not as a bunch of individuals, but how do you communicate to them as a group? How do you influence the groups? That's Edward Bernays. And then you have his relationship to, of course, Netflix CEO. Now, it doesn't mean anything that they're blood relatives, but it's just an interesting observation. And they're both related to Sigmund Freud. So they know what's beneath the hood. They know what's in your subconscious. They know what motivates people at a level that bypasses their conscious volition. And they inculcate it into their movies. Like, they know what they're doing. Every Netflix release is an influence operation. And again, it's not just Netflix, it's everything. Everything that reaches a mass audience, that is. To be considered predictive or concurrent or relevant, it has to be platformed through some state-controlled propaganda vector. But we have every reason to think that the visuals are going to get better. So it's going to become increasingly difficult to suss out the fake ones by visual alone. But that shouldn't affect us, because if you're outside of the duopoly, if you're not in MSM or alt media, MSM Plus, if you're not in their duopoly, you're outside of their box. I don't even draw a circle around it because it's inclusive of the stuff they leave out. And so if you're already aware of news bending, history bending, special effects, hoax indicators, the world stage as a model, and then of course the long-term manipulation of worldview, if you're already aware of this, then you're not under the misconception that you can just trust what's on the screen is real. You don't need to rely on the performance being so bad that you can see through it. That's not a reliable way to approach these things anyway. I describe our approach here as that of the blindfolded skeptic. You only need your third eye. Ryler says Julius Caesar was kidnapped by pirates and made a decree that all pirates must be crucified. I never heard that before. But Trump as Julius Caesar getting killed, Caesar's birthday 7/13, Harrison Ford 7/13. The Harrison Ford thing's interesting because he becomes the Red Hulk. And I thought that's got to be foreshadowing like Trump in his final form, like MAGA. There's the Hulk stuff is just strange. If you want to look at it, you got Harrison Ford, who's shot at in a theater. And I'm thinking, like Ford Theater, Abe Lincoln. But Harrison Ford 7/13, playing a president. Mark Ruffalo 11/22, playing a president. There's then Dennis Hopper in the 529 thing. And then, of course, so De Niro, his birthday isn't, I think it's in April or something. But the significance here, of course, is that you have the Travis Bickle connection to John Hinckley with the 529 birthday, who shot Reagan. But this is just scratching the surface. What we're looking at here aren't cherry-picked or arbitrary, but this is actually systemic. The fakery is systemic, but there are hallmarks of fakery. And one of the things we picked up on, it has to do with the significance of names and birth dates. It's very Shakespearean. I mean, the world stage is a term from Shakespeare. Brave New World, by the way, came out of The Tempest, which is in play right now, apparently. And there are some who say we pay so much attention to the nuance of movies that we are distracted from Armageddon scenario A, B, or C. Like, oh, you're not paying attention to the doomsday. Here you are lost in the weeds of these movies, and the bad guys are coming, the redcoats are coming, or whatever is coming, sky is falling. And I'm like, no, you live in a movie. And if you're threatened by what's in the movie, then you think it's real. We literally live in a movie in the sense that we're living through history in the making. And it's not organic. It's proactively created. We can prove that. But the real shock here, the paradigm shift, is the timeline involved. Okay, for one, if you are aware of psyops, which exist, if you're aware of these, you already accepted the premise that A, psyops exist, B, that they require pre-planning. At a very minimum conservative estimate, you would have to conclude that the time it took to plan this would be likely correlated with the time it took to create the contemporaneous media content. So if a movie comes out that perfectly reflects the thing, well, how far back was that movie made? So if you look at the predictive content, that gives you an idea of how far back it was planned. And even being conservative, you have to admit a few years. So if it doesn't break your mind to think 3 years, oh, this event was planned 3 years ago. I mean, there's no way they planned the Charlie Kirk squibbing the day before. So if you can accept 3 years, we'll just give it a really easy one. This was planned 3 years ago. Okay, well, this event, you can agree, had significance. Historic significance. I mean, they may overstate it. Jack Posobiec said, 100 years from now, historians are going to look back at the sacrifice of Charlie Kirk and say, This was the turning point where we saved Western civilization. 9/11, historically significant. COVID-19, historically significant. So if you go through the historically significant events and their pre-planning, then you could say, well, and when I say historically significant, it's not just that they go in the history books and they form our collective frame of reference, like the moon landing. These are big deals. But when the event happens, yeah, it's a fake event. It's one simulated event in a sea of media. But everything in media bounces off of it. All the pundits, all the editorials, all the news stories bounce off the fake event. So it actually permeates the entire media ecosystem. Everything is bent towards the fake. So the meta script that gets superimposed onto the organic history is reinforced after the event. So you have again, pre-planning, and then it goes along with, when we're suggesting that the pre-planning goes as far back as the earliest foreshadowing, product placement. The product would have to pre-exist the advertisements that they buy for the product. And the products we're talking about here are historic events. So that's why I'm suggesting that the predictive content is an indicator. So my argument here is that these events can be reasonably determined to have been planned far enough in advance that we can say that our history is being creatively directed. Plain Dakota says, was there programming for Route 91? That's a good one. We'll have to talk about that one. Route 91 Harvest Festival. The only stuff I've seen for that one is kind of specious. I mean, it depends. If you believe that Stephen Paddock had a number 13 tattooed on his neck, there's some debate about that. But the opening song of, I think it's The Hangover, Part 3 or something. There's a Hangover movie where it opens up with this scene where the characters are out lying on the ground in Vegas, just like the people ducking from the shooter. But I don't know, but there's quite a lot with the Harvest Festival we can look at. So we need to look at this. Was there anything preceding it? And that was 10/1/2017. 13 months later, you had Thousand Oaks at the borderline, where 50 of the victims from the Harvest Festival were shot at in California. 50 of the same people. And not only were 50 of the same people shot at a different event, at a different country music event, but down the street, there was a training situation going on for a mass shooting event that involved 50 crisis actors, and they based it on Vegas. Very peculiar. But the Route 91 thing was also connected to Maui with the same police chief. And even now, you still have shills out there saying, oh, there was a second shooter. He was in a helicopter. Anybody pushing second shooter or the event was real is operating from a limited frame of reference. If you think Vegas was real, your sources are what? Mainstream and alternative. And they're both telling you it was Stephen Paddock, A, or B, it was a black op by secret government assassins in a helicopter. Like, there's always this preposterous second shooter story. But yeah, we'll have to look at the context, you know, were there drills, what kind of predictive stuff. The Matrix comes out, what was that on? Matrix came out in March, late March. And then you have the Littleton, Colorado shooters who were dressed like characters out of the Matrix. And the media made that correlation right away. All right. We have covered quite a lot of ground here. We didn't really dig too deep into anything other than the JFK stuff. But this is kind of a cursory overview, because what we're doing here, the concept is, it doesn't take a rocket surgeon to call an event fake. Everybody's doing it. But what we're doing is we are putting it into a context. If all these events are fake, and the ones we're pointing out are, then each one has a script. That goes without saying. So each one of these fake events has a script. And they're all on a timeline that superimposes our organic timeline. The thing that I'm pointing out here is every one of these events has indicators of having been planned way before it happened. So our fake event program, all these fake events that exist on this hypothetical script, I call the meta script. I don't know what they call it. The version of things that we're going to get are planned so far in advance that it opens up a can of worms. If the event is planned so far in advance, then what else can you deduce? And this is a great unmasking. So if we go to the CK thing, well, if true, well, then the kids are fake. Because it'd be preposterous to think that these two world stage actors were actually having babies. Then it would also mean that the people who are surrounding him directly at TPUSA, who, by the way, TPUSA was heavily involved in January 6th. So we have to look at that. But then you could start listing the names of the people who know he's not dead. And this would include everyone from President Donald J. Trump to J.D. Vance to Candace Owens. Now, most of your low-level influencers on X, these conspiracy S posters like Ian Carroll, Owen Schroyer, yeah, well, Ian Carroll certainly doesn't know Charlie Kirk's alive. He doesn't seem like he'd be very much in the know. Owen Schroyer, I would argue, probably knows it's fake. And I say so because Owen Schroyer is one of these January 6th crisis actors who was, fake imprisoned. But when you start looking at who would be in the know, and then you start looking event to event, and then you start connecting the directors, the writers, and the musicians who are producing the foreshadowing content and the concurrently released content, because the reinforcement stuff's all done by political influencers, by commentators. But when you start connecting the directors to the events, it starts to create this composite, this picture where we're looking at the structure, the architecture of media, and there's this entrainment process going on, meaning that the entertainment and the news are actually synchronized. And this synchronization has gone on for a long time. It's endemic. However, it led a lot of people to think that these were, quote, synchronicities. Oh, look, there's a synchronicity. I saw it in the movies and it happened on the news. It's an eerie coincidence. Well, these are not synchronicities in the sense of a personally meaningful coincidence, but rather like in the Jungian sense, Carl Jung. But no, we're talking about they're synchronized for the purposes of influencing you by inserting things into your frame of reference, what we call the misinformation effect, suggestibility, covert influence. Again, we're talking about the masters of influence operations and public relations. Yeah, I saw that one, Jamarian Bay. Erica Kirk from Florida, married to the governor of Florida, 1967 to 71. Is that the one? Yeah, she looks like a prototype for Erica Kirk. She went by the name Madam X. So there might be something there. Isn't Madam X, is that a Madonna thing where she wears like the X on her eye during that video where everybody dies of a plague? Some weird COVID foreshadowing. But yeah, Madam X is the prototype for Erica Kirk. And there may be some significance here. We have to look into it because Erica Kirk has been portrayed as a widow, but also as possibly an evil villain. And this corresponds to her characterization as this femme fatale with snake eyes, as having some weird, eerie connection to Tyler and the Shooting being referenced in that music video. That's strange. Heads of state. Again, we've talked about these before, but it's the same actress who's the blonde femme fatale and snake eyes, and her name is Vice President Kirk. She gets shot in the neck. The Hulu show, The Tempest, I reference, is about the widow and how she's accused of faking her grief. So there's probably something to it. Some have suggested that Charlie Kirk was templated in that character from Family Ties, this young Republican played by Michael J. Fox. It might be true. But what we're doing here is we're doing the character analysis as well as event analysis. And so going through the characters, I like to find, what are their corresponding entertainment proxies, like the movie representations of them. And you build it up, and it's quite intriguing, and it's damning. It is damning, as in it is highly suggestive that these movies are used as a form of advertising and product placement and foreshadowing for historically significant events that we will be processing as real later. Because that's the point. The point of it is for us to internalize the state myths, to internalize the fake events. You weren't there, but you're processing it as real, not just because you were conditioned for it and you perceived it through the news, but because the follow-up echo chamber that reinforces its existence to every corner of media and everybody's opinion. I know people who like, I think Erica Kirk was behind Charlie Kirk's death, or no, Donald Trump was behind it, or someone else told me he was squibbed. Like, I've heard all these takes on it. It saturates the media ecosystem. You can almost say a hoax indicator. If you want to know something's fake, a good hoax indicator, everybody you know is talking about it. It's something insignificant or something not local, something not relevant, but everybody's got an opinion on it, and it's perfectly bifurcated. It's perfectly split down the middle in their duopoly. So when I say a bifurcated psywar, I mean every event has two interpretations. It's their duopoly. Like I mentioned before, the AA flight colliding with the Black Hawk helicopter. Well, the mainstream version is it was an accident caused by Trump and Musk and Doge cutting the government funding so they couldn't hire air traffic control. So this was caused by anti-government. So if you're on the pro-government side, anti-government caused it. But if you're on the political right, it was caused by leftist policies, DEI. They put a female pilot in the chopper and got everybody killed. And I called this in advance. When I saw the plane hitting the helicopter, when I saw it was a female pilot, I said, watch. Right wing will blame DEI, left wing will blame government cuts. They'll blame Trump and Musk. Now, the reason why this is significant here is that both sides agree that the event was real. The crash that happened during a drill. So they both agree it was real, but they each blame each other. This is template for every single psyop. So it's another hoax indicator. If the response is perfectly split down the middle and each side blames the other, it's probably a hoax. So the hoax indicators are the things we see with every single fake event, almost without fail. And you don't see the same things with real events. If there's a real event, it's not going to be talked about by everybody that you know, and it's not going to fit neatly into ready-made political agendas. And it's not going to have these predictable hallmarks of a hoax. So when we say something's fake, it's not because we are just being incredulous. No, this is a position of informed disbelief. And ironically, from the off-world stage perspective, when you call something fake, you know far more about the event you're calling fake than the people who believe in the event itself. Like, I believe it's real. Why? I saw it on TV. I believe it's fake. Why? Well, because of these 15 data points and because of these relationships to these previous events and because of all these other factors. Can you explain these away? Deviations from standard protocol. I mean, there's so many. And also, when we talk about the ready-made political agendas, we need to start including alt media rabbit trails. Predictable. So I've been describing the rabbit trails where Candace Owens is leading people as well paved back in the 60s. They're not breaking new ground. They're using a formula. So there's a formulaic rollout of conspiracy theories that follow every fake event. And usually the term they use is false flag. I don't see that used much anymore. And I don't know if that was our influence, but what we're doing here is we're engaging in a bit of a culture war in the conspiracy subculture, because the term false flag was popularized largely by Alex Jones and David Icke after 9/11. But the theory of the false flag is basically either the event is real or the event is real. But in the second version of real, someone else did it. So if you say it's a false flag, you're not detracting from what you saw on TV. You're just saying someone else did it. This is the classic mainstream and alt mainstream. So to call anything a false flag is to designate it real. People really died. That was a real tragedy. And if it was real, then there's no reason to think it was planned in advance. At least not that long in advance. This is why predictive programming is so problematic for us to point out, because it destroys the credibility of the story as presented. But we had made it a point to challenge this methodology for approaching news. Real or false flag, real or false flag. Nobody says false flag anymore. Not in our circles. I haven't heard that. It's archaic. If somebody says false flag, say, hey, 2001 called. The 9/11 truth movement wants their archaic terminology back. Their outmoded frame of reference. The old conspiracy theorist operating system. Like, you're out of date. You're outmoded. You need to update your operating system if you're still using the term false flag. If you still insist people died in psyops, you are also operating under the presupposition that the mainstream is essentially objective and we just debate over our political biases, but the thing actually happens. And if that's your perspective, you are what we would call an auto-believer. The auto-believer has accepted the burden of proof. They believe it's real unless it's proven fake. Well, who's going to prove it fake for you? The auto-believing is the standard operating procedure for anything in the media for most people. If it's on the news, they assume it's been vetted. You assume it's true enough, you can trust it. There might be some bias, but it's fundamentally true. And that's just not a good approach anymore. And if you're someone who considers yourself a truther and you're skeptical of media, then there should be no automatic belief. To be a skeptic, by definition, is to suspend belief until you can look at all the available facts. Well, you can't assume you're going to have all the available facts the day one of the story. Like, hey, this big event just happened. Look at the headline. I believe it. That's not enough information. You would need to wait. You could say days, weeks. It's up to you. Nobody can force you to believe something the next day. Like, you must believe it. No, you don't have to. You can say, I don't trust the news because they're a bunch of liars. I will form my opinion, my informed judgment on the matter in 6 weeks, after the dust settles. After the media grifters with their engagement bait get their clicks, then I will opine. There's no reason to jump the gun. So when someone says they believe in something, you can say, on what evidence? What is your evidence? And if their evidence is, I saw it on TV, well, then you could just dismiss their opinion, because this is Hitchens' razor, very convenient heuristic, which is any claim presented without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. If you're going to say it's real because you saw it on TV, that's not evidence. That's hearsay. See-say. How many of you here for see-say? I came up with the term see-say. You know, hear it, you say it's true. Hearsay. You just believed it because you trusted your source. Well, I came up with see-say because people see it on TV and they say it's real. I added that to our lexicon shortly after the Department of Homeland Security stole it, and they created the hashtag see-say. And they said, if you see something, say something. So if you see a terrorist walking through Walmart, call the DHS. So the very people who are staging the psyops, the Department of Homeland Security, stole our term for dismissing media and malappropriated it to reinforce terror hysteria. Jamarin May says Clandis was saying the Macron's responsible for Kirk. Yeah, the Macrons hired Israeli assassins to take out Kirk to warn her about speaking about Bridget Macron's relationship with her husband, because Candace Owens claims that Macron is actually the uncle. I don't know how it's so common. It goes beyond run-of-the-mill standard Orthodox transvestigationism. Was it transvestigationism? What are the experts? What do the crotch zoomers call themselves? The guys on Twitter who are always like posting pictures of celebrity crotches and like, oh look, these guys are ridiculous. They post pictures of Hollywood stars, men like Brad Pitt or Sylvester Stallone, and these guys are walking downstairs, and their legs are sort of bow-legged looking, and they'll say, look, it's a woman, based on how they walk. And I'm like, well, please show me a picture of women walking bow-legged. Like, I've never seen that. Sorry, these people live in their own little universes. Okay, you're going to have to call right back. Just missed you. But what they're saying here, what Clandis is saying, first of all, she said Bridget Macron was related to the Milgram experiment, which is just strange. And like the connections she's making are absurd. And I think it's being done deliberately. I think it's being done deliberately in order to tarnish the reputation of the media ecosystem. It's part of the infrastructure. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hey, Tim. Sorry for calling in, like, what, an hour into your show? I just realized you're taking calls now.
Oh, yeah, we've been live for about an hour and 42 minutes. We still got about 18 minutes or so.
Okay. So I'll try and make it quick. I heard you talking a little bit about Clandis or Candace Owens and their bizarre, was it transvestigation conspiracy theory thing, and their role on the world stage, them being essentially controlled opposition. I wanted to ask you, it's like, with the presence of controlled opposition regarding a particular topic, could that be an indication of there being some truth in it? Because controlled opposition often mixes truth with error.
Well, no, I see it's more of a duopoly. Like, they know that not everyone's going to believe the mainstream, and they need to contain the discourse. So they create viable counter narratives, and all of these fit perfectly along the political horseshoe extremes of the right and left. And the conspiracy theorist right, which includes Candace Owens, the red pill, the conspiracy theories, those are all a subset of woke right. And at the core, their central scapegoat is Jewish world domination. And it's a perfect mirror of the left-wing critical race theory. So I would say that, no, it's not an indication that things real. It's an indication that they know that not everyone will uniformly believe the mainstream version.
Absolutely. It's like creating walls, guardrails, if you will, for them. People are more critically minded to reject the mainstream narrative. They fall into the traps of these controlled opposition individuals. I just think that the oversimplification of saying Israel controls everything and that Kirk was a Mossad, victim, a Mossad hit victim, and all the crazy stuff that Candace kind of puts out there. There is something to be said about how the official narrative is incorrect. So at least that much is true. It's like the official narrative is incorrect. They come to the wrong conclusion, though, where they still presuppose that the official narrative is reporting on a real assassination. And they scapegoat another actor on the world stage, this case Israel or the Jews. I think that what it is there's still elements of truth in the view that there is a lot of people who are perhaps disenfranchised with the political right, and the controlled opposition they provide is deliberately made to eventually make them have egg on their face when Candace Owens starts saying crazy stuff like second or third shooters. So it's hard for me to explain. It's kind of like with...
I know what you're saying. Okay, it works like this. It's called triangulation, where the mainstream media is actually triangulating them. So these aren't equal viewpoints in their view. So the mainstream view is the approved, and the alt is automatically rejected. And this is a triangulation against the two, but the mainstream favors the approved version. And in the dynamics of manipulation, you would describe one as the golden child and the other as the scapegoat, meaning one can do no wrong, one can do no right. And the triangulator, who treats one as always wrong and the other as always right, backs the one who's always right in their oppression of the one who's always wrong. So I think it's a triangulation where, yeah, they want the conspiracy theorists to have egg on their face so that the establishment and the establishment followers can take part in bashing the nonconformists.
Yeah, and the assumed truth that both of them have is that that Charlie Kirk really did die. So both sides,
yes, and
whether it be a far right or far left, yeah.
And it may also be the case that they engineered it to be an unsolvable, shady thing so they can do documentaries about it for the next 60 years. So the JFK assassination thing is an industry. And I think it's one of the main starting points for conspiracy culture was this JFK thing is like the biggest conspiracy in the world to kill the president. And the reason why the conspiracy theories persist is that they deliberately inculcated ambiguity in order for them to persist, because the alternative, the conspiracy theorist side of media is part of the infrastructure.
And I think, yeah, that's basically something how, even since I was a teen, I was always able to identify these, if you will, thesis, antithesis, this triangulation being done, is always looking what's the constant between both sides. What are the stipulations, presuppositions that both assume are true, and let's take a closer look at that, right? And for me, it's just been such a, very useful heuristic or tool to kind of see that, okay, they both agree that on this, and it turns out that one thing they agree on is actually totally false. So for the things like the controlled opposition, like Bart Sibrel with the moon landing and stuff, he still provides compelling evidence that the moon landing was fake, but he still thinks space is real and that space travel, that they're hiding a bigger, more advanced problem. So that's how you can identify. Whether witting or unwitting.
Yeah, another one is like the mainstream will tell you that your lifestyle, Sync Kid asks if this is a replay. So the mainstream will say that your capitalistic system, your consumption of fossil fuels is causing the earth to literally die. That's the mainstream version. The alternative says that's ridiculous. CO2 isn't doing this. Climate change is a hoax. But they need everyone to uniformly agree that man needs to be regulated by government so he doesn't destroy the world. So they accomplish this by giving alt media alternative climate change, and they call it anti-geoengineering. So one side opposes the free market screwing up the weather, and the other side opposes secret government projects messing up the weather. So each side agrees that the weather is being destroyed by man, the earth is being destroyed, but they blame each other.
Yeah, and then that's in both of them fighting, the assumed truth that, the climate is getting worse, right, is obscured. That assumed truth is something we should actually be analyzing, but it's obscured in the assumption.
Exactly.
That's definitely true. Of course,
exactly.
Everything's getting worse, right?
And that's a very successful approach, though, because it gets everybody on the same sheet, because everybody's paying carbon taxes. Everybody's paying for their emission on the basis of global warming. Even the people don't believe in global warming, but then they can accept it's happening. They just think it's being done by Bill Gates or something.
And then basically with both sides, they're fighting for the narcissist's approval because it's assumed to be true. That's why the microcosm with a narc triangulating maybe two guys against each other for her worship or something. That's there you go. That's the perfect example. Then a microcosm, in the macrocosm, we have these political parties, conspiracy theorists versus the blue pill mainstream. What I would say, though, and I did provide some responses in the Discord. I don't want to reiterate them there. You can probably read it yourself. I would consider applying that same line of thinking to, Catholicism versus the mystery schools. I do believe that they are both like thesis, antithesis. And the presupposition between both of them is the kind of Jesus they're talking about. They're both talking about the same Jesus. It just so happens it's not the one that's recorded in the record that was suppressed for over 1,500 years. So that's, and not just, by the way, forget about the writings, the followers, the people, the living epistles, the followers of that spirit who were mercilessly persecuted and killed for rejecting the power of the papacy. Dostoevsky even talked about this briefly in his book, The Brothers Karamazov. Ivan had set up a play called The Grand Inquisitor, and they talk about the Jesuits versus the Freemasons. It's this perpetual battle between Gnostic scientism and more Catholic or government Babylonian control, where it's like government and religion versus the underdogs, the disorganized Freemasons fighting against it. It just so turns out both of them are evil.
Well, the religions that we're talking about, the mystery schools, are the ones that we're talking about. The idea of there being an exoteric, or the public ritual, the public religion, and the esoteric, that the priesthood has a secret version. But the mystery schools today, like the most popular one would probably be the OTO or Thelema, they do have a sun god, but they don't refer to him as Jesus. It's usually like Osiris or something like that, but they don't really attach it to the Christian Jesus, but more of a general sun god, and then they have the counterpart, the goddess. But yeah, it's definitely the case, though, that the mystery schools believe that they have the authentic version of the religion, not meant for the masses, and that they cut the goddess out before they gave it to the masses. I mean, that's Dan Brown's thing with the Da Vinci Code, where they're hiding the goddess. I don't find that to be unbelievable when I look at the ceremonies themselves. I mean, I've been to a lot of Catholic masses, and then I have attended a Gnostic Catholic mass, and what it looks like to me is pagan nature worship and the personification of the celestial realm, the sun, and its interaction with the world as a life bringer. But it just seems like it's a common basis for a lot of these different versions of the religion. It seems to have, I think, the same kind of core doctrine.
Yeah, I agree with that completely, because those ceremonies are essentially some forms of occulted sun worship. It just so happens that that's not the teachings of Christ, but through the world stage, through history, through these big denominations and church organizations, people have kind of just accepted it to be, and that Jesus is born on December 25th. And, the three wise men, you can basically take truth and syncretize it with an established religion. And in the same way a narc fights for attention and praise, spiritually, I believe we live in a system where it's like worship. Instead of Star Wars, we're living in worship wars. And what it is I even tell this to atheists and agnostics, even if you call yourself atheist, your ability to worship does not go away. And what you hold in highest regard and highest esteem, that transforms your character and what you do, the way you treat other people. And the Americanized world stage Jesus, which we are rapidly seeing beginning to take crystallized effect with the Charlie Kirk killing, is leading people to this belief that America is the chosen land, that God bless America, America the beautiful, all that stuff. that even if it becomes the most popular thing in this country, it does not change the original teachings, right? So like when Catholicism was the predominant ideology,
what do you think about?
Not make it any more authentic.
Like I've been coming across this idea. I mean, I've heard this many times, but lately it's getting very popularized on YouTube. The notion is that the God of the Bible is actually not the real source of creation, but is in fact the demiurge, meaning like this localized entity that it means creator or architect. And I for some time I thought, I think the Freemasons worship the demiurge. And I see all the symbolism.
The great architect.
Yeah, well,
the great architect.
But I don't think it's separate from like I'm open to the possibility here that the God of the Bible is the demiurge, that the Gnostics might have it right. I have no evidence to contradict this.
Sure, and my position against it, the idea that the Father Jesus is a young God, and that there are older aeons, and that we are living in the demiurge constructs as pleroma, or like spirit trapped in the material realm. It's basically a complete inversion of what it is the record says. Basically, if I also believe in the demiurge, I just believe it's the actual accuser. I think it's Satan. But what the teaching, the meta-religion of Gnosticism has done, in the same way you do metascript analysis, I've done meta-religion analysis, and all of them are Gnostic. Every single one of them. This idea of us being spiritual beings, having a material experience, has a lot of truth based on it. But unfortunately, that truth is given the perspective where it usurps the creator God. And the fundamental disproof, the way you disprove that, is that everything was made perfect. It was actually very good. The Gnostic idea of the creator God from Genesis being the demiurge is the view that the demiurge created a broken world. Like the demiurge is a kind of, either sometimes in some versions he's cruel and vindictive, and other times he's also just aloof and doesn't really know what he's doing. That's contrary to literally the first page of the record.
Like, I consider myself something of a Gnostic in a lot of ways because of the way that I experience the world or the universe, however you want to call it, and my place in it. And I've always found the religions of the world to be places of darkness where you outsource the job of inner knowledge and wisdom and understanding to these authorities. And any experience you have outside of the norm is then deemed of this higher power, of this God as they define it. And I think that there's an error here because we don't fully understand the human mind. The knowledge of psychiatry is relatively new. And I don't think the experience of intuition, precognition, telepathy, synchronicity, I don't think these things have been adequately explained by the world systems or by psychiatry or by religion. And I think that the religious paradigm tends to ignore these things under superstitious grounds, like it's divination, it's witchcraft, it's devils. But I've experienced these things so much that for the longest time, I was open to what could be causing it. Now I'm of the opinion that many of what we consider to be psychic phenomenon or even mystical experiences are not coming from God or the universe, but are actually a part of our own psyche that is yet to be integrated. And I think this is true for synchronicity. So like I've had so many strange, not strange to me, but experiences that seem to indicate that there's a higher power ordering things, guiding me. And now I don't think it was a higher power. I think that I'm just operating with, I think I'm operating with, with a knowledge base accessible to my subconscious mind that communicates to me through the medium of synchronicity and intuition. But I think it's an aspect of the mind. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of religious experiences are actually just psychological experiences that haven't been properly designated and categorized and therefore not understood. And so because of this, I've really come to see religion as a force of darkness because there's not a religious person out there that would validate my experiences. They would say, your brain's misfiring, you need to go to church. Or psychiatrists would say, you're insane. You need a padded. My entire life, I've talked about this stuff. My entire life, the religious people have always pushed back against it. And the people who are leaning into psychiatry would say, you need meds. So I'm like, okay, either I'm crazy or I'm possessed by devils, or maybe there's a third alternative, that maybe it's an aspect of the mind that is yet to be integrated. And the more I look into Carl Jung and his work, the more I think that I'm right about, well, he's right about this, and I'm in agreement with him that we don't know enough right now to rule it out as merely paranormal or illness, or to deride it as some kind of demonic influence or whatever that means, like a Tucker Carlson level explanation. But I think,
and I don't ever, I don't say it's always demonic. I've experienced things in my life which I do believe are from Christ. And I just, what I would caution you against is the appeal to motive fallacy, where you think that in, Deuteronomy, where it speaks against, astrology, or speaking to the dead, or divination. You've told me openly that these are forms of restrictions of people because there's actually great power in these things. Right, that's an appeal to motive that you're establishing that way. I happen to have the view that these systems actually can mislead people and only work within the confines of the world stage. Wasn't it J.P. Morgan who said that millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do? And we've already deconstructed a lot of fake news stories that have parallels with astrology. But I'm saying it only works within the world because it's a stage. So a lot of these world stage characters that have birthdays associated with it. So it's like a fake power. So I'm not.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that though. I'm saying, it's subjective, right? It's subjective, but subjectively speaking, I've had intuitive flashes. I've had what seem almost like, the word psychic is overused, but I have had insights into things that I didn't have direct sensory experience of, like knowledge of not clairvoyance necessarily, but something along those lines. Synchronicity, precognition, telepathy, these things don't fit into the establishment paradigm, and religion hasn't properly addressed them. And when it comes to the dead, I've had a couple, and I'm not the only one, because I've spoken to a lot of people about this. A lot of people I know have had experienced communication from the dead, the recently deceased. And I've had that myself. And so I don't just dismiss all this stuff as Satan or as mental illness and cope. I think there's something to it. And far from being misleading, what I find that it seems to do is it seems to give people enough of a glimpse, but not more than the human mind can take, without revealing the whole game. But I think that there is something there that is suggestive of the continuity of consciousness post bodily death. And I tend to agree this is true because some of the perspectives or information that I receive through what I would consider to be intuition would suggest that my information field, or this knowledge base, is in fact somewhat transcendent of time, space, and the physical senses. So I'm like, okay, well, if that's true, then there's no reason to think that the death of the body is death of the mind, or what we think of as the mind. So I'm kind of open to the idea.
Yeah, and I was going to say, again, I'm not denying your experiences, and I do believe that the flashes can come from things that are beyond death. It's just I don't think it came from departed people, but from entities that don't live in material bodies that die.
So then, okay, let's give me an example. Here's an example. So let's say somebody dies, and the mom, the dad, the grandfather, and a couple of the siblings all have similar experiences that they connect on later. Oh, you had this happen. I had this happen. Are you suggesting that there was some kind of a demon that was tricking them?
No, it could also. I'll say if those experiences were trying to tell them that this is that person and they're still alive, but in spirit form. Unfortunately, I would have to say yes, but I'm not saying that
demons.
God? No, that God can't continue with sending messages that can remind you of someone or tell them that they'll be in the resurrection. What it is the proposition you're making that life after death is actually the most common element in all forms of religion. It's called spiritualism, which is again directly contradicts the very first thing that says, the soul that sinneth it will die. The wages of sin is death.
That's why I say that. That's why I disagree with religion. I think their answers are wrong. My experience is
no, but I'm saying you're agreeing with religion because Catholicism teaches eternal hellfire, underworld, purgatory. Hinduism has reincarnation. Various Native American and African tribes have those speaking to
Right.
Departed chiefs and stuff like. So spiritualism is actually the most common element. So the proposition you're making is that the world stage or world religions are kind of obscuring it and providing. They're trying to hide the fact that there's life after death, and quite the opposite.
No, what they're doing is they're outsourcing it. No, it's like you can't do it yourself. Like, yeah, you can pray, but you can't do witchcraft. You can believe in life after death, but you can't do necromancy. So what they do is they're guardrailing or gatekeeping.
I believe in life after death after a resurrection. For example, Lazarus, when he was dead for 3 days, I don't think in those 3 days he was, poking people around and saying, "Hey, I'm going to come back." I think he was just out. There was no passage of time for when he was dead and then when he was called out from the tomb by Jesus. And basically, it's like people who are dead, it's like their next perceptible thought is when they're resurrected. And this only comes from a belief in a literal resurrection. This is why I pointed that out to you in the think tank, where Paul had said that the Jews think the idea of Christ being the Messiah, that's foolishness. But the Greeks think a resurrection is foolishness. Now, you might not call it foolishness, but you call it allegorical. So subconsciously, you think believing a literal resurrection is pretty foolish and exoteric. You have to be quite profane to think in a literal resurrection.
Like literal resurrection is in like a skeleton of an embalmed corpse in a hermetically sealed casket, like reconstituting flesh, and then somehow.
No, I mean a brand new body and with the breath of life. So no, not about preserving a decaying body like done in the Egyptian mystery schools. I mean like a brand new person, not like their ideas living on, not like their, or like the notion of we have old ideas and then when we learn something new, our old version dies and then we're resurrected as a new understanding. None of that. I mean like literally someone is dead and they are brought back to life. As literal as Lazarus' resurrection, as literal as the widow's son from the widow of Sarepta, when Elijah had raised her son from the dead, as literal as the other examples that Christ had done. And both the mystery schools, Freemasons, they take these stories and run with it and create a whole other mythology, much like the way narcissists will take a drop of truth.
Okay, well, what about spiritualism? Like, what makes your perspective on the Christian theology more valid than spiritualism in general, or even paganism, or Native American myths?
No, it could be wrong. It could be wrong, but it's consistent. I can say with certainty that Catholic teaching is inconsistent with the text. Pentecostal is inconsistent. Any one who says that, when you die, you instantly go to heaven, or you're burning in some S&M dungeon below with fire and demons dancing around and stuff, I can say that's inconsistent with what Solomon said. For the living know they shall die, but the dead know not anything. A living dog is better than.
You say consistent with the texts, with the scripture, but I'm saying with people's lived experiences, my communication with people in the realm of necromancy or paranormal, life after death, I've talked to a lot of people about it. And what I find is there is a consistency in how these things appear to people and how I've experienced it. And these consistencies, which I won't get into now, suggest to me that these are common human experiences and they're outside the bounds of the religious explanations, which is why I don't go with the religions, because I don't feel like they have the right answers for me. And I'm going off of my lived experiences, not appealing to a scripture from some specific religion.
I've had lived experiences that would affirm spiritualism, but you said I'm going off my lived experiences, not going off the scripture, but there's a way that seems right unto a man that leads to death. Going only off of experience is a problem. It's like a wise person learns from experience, but a fool only learns from experience. So it's like, if you only take in your sensory perception, you don't listen to records or people who have given wisdom through the ages and stuff, that could be a problem. And what I get with necromancers speaking to the dead, the Christian explanation is that if there are fallen angels or entities that don't inhabit physical bodies that die, they've lived for thousands of years. Like they tempted and confused Solomon right? They're smarter than any of us could ever be. And there's even a story recorded in 1 Samuel of King Saul, Samuel, a prophet, had died, and there was explicit condemnations of necromancers speaking to the dead. But he's so far from God at this point, he goes to the witch of Endor and asks for a seance to speak to the dead prophet Samuel. And it says she summons a familiar spirit who looks and sounds exactly like Samuel. And he believes it, and it leads to him dying in battle. Well, he loses the battle and he commits suicide based on the information that this.
I'm not using Ouija boards, but I'm just saying is that unbidden, unsummoned, randomly, post-mortem communications with the recently departed is not an uncommon experience. And for me, it was more like a way of saying, I'm still here, or it's not over yet. Like, it was just a confirmation that I wasn't even seeking. I wasn't looking for it when it came.
Sure.
And I wasn't the only one in the room. And I would describe it as somewhat poltergeisty when it happened. And then I talked about this with some others who had described similar experiences. And I have someone else I know who had another one. And some of these things they're kind of mind-blowing because they're like a combination of direct messaging, synchronicity, intuition, and sometimes even what appear to be, you could say, apparition. But I'm just saying that it's a common enough experience that I'm not just going to wipe it clean and say, yeah, all these people have just been victimized by bored fallen angels. Like, I'm pretty sure that these are the actual recently deceased still communicating with the bereaved.
I don't think it's bored either. It's like bored fallen angels. I think it's very functional, these lies. It's a powerful, and okay, I'll give a real life.
Okay, wait, so you're suggesting like a fallen angel came into the room to get me and a group of people to feel better about somebody's passing? Like, that's really nice. But why would they do that?
Narcs are actually very charming and very kind, but they have pretty.
I mean, so in other words, was I deceived into thinking that life doesn't extinguish after death because it's not fitting the?
Yes.
See,
yes, because that fits into the system.
This is the thing about, like, we're not starting with the. But wait, we're not starting with the assumption that you are an authority on these matters or that you have the authoritative framework, because your religion is one of many, and you would agree that 95% of the Christians are doing it wrong because they're in church. So you're not even a majority. Like,
I wouldn't agree with them.
Your opinion is that most Christians are wrong.
I don't think if you go. No, I said that a Christian is a follower of the Christ, and it has nothing to do with denomination. It has nothing to do with going to church. It has nothing to do with, like, because I know you set up that.
Well, okay, Muslims are wrong then, right? Muslims are wrong. Muslims are not worshiping. You said that Muslims are worshiping. They're not worshiping God.
I have no problem with I have no problem with Muslims. I have no problem with Catholics. I have no problem with Mormons. I have a problem with Mormonism. I have a problem with Islam. I have a problem with Catholicism. Does that make sense? So it's like the individual people, I don't know their lives, and I'm not going to take the role of Christ. The Father judges no man, but has committed all judgment.
But I cannot be intellectually honest.
Religion is wrong.
I cannot be intellectually honest and say that the Mormons and the Muslims are wrong and that your version of things is more authoritative. I can't say that. I don't have the basis for it because these are all similar in type.
That's fine. I'm not. You don't need to. But just when you bring up stuff like, what was it that religion and Christianity is just another religion used to control people. That is exactly that. Going back to the triangulation discussion, that is the false dichotomy that's set up, where it's the us versus the church, and versus the church subjugating these delinquent rebels who are trying to. That's not Christianity. The kingdom of God is within you, as Christ had said to the Pharisees. The kingdom comes not with observation, neither shall they say, lo here or lo there, for behold, the kingdom of God is within you. The idea of an earthly Christian kingdom is the underpinning of all forms of religion, period. And in Daniel's vision, the prophet Daniel, he had a vision of, a symbolic one, of the king of the north and the king of the south, and they do battle until the end of time. The king of the north represents religious theocracies, and the king of the south represents secular scientism, atheism, right? These two are always doing battle. And, an example, when Napoleon, with atheistic France, took Pope Pius VI prisoner, that was an example of, like, the king of the South usurping the king of the North. And then it's like the king of the North, they always are going back and forth. And in America, we're seeing the ascension of a symbolic king of the North with a return to a kind of theocracy. America is speedrunning Rome's republic, military despotism to a theocracy. America was once a republic.
Well, what do you say about my premise here, that all these old traditional religions have been supplanted and replaced in function and in form by media itself? That media has not only taken over worldview, it's provided a universal worldview, and it's media, not any religion, that is controlling our history. So I kind of feel like religions are kind of a previous iteration of the worldview forming mechanism that we're under now. And now it's just more of a secular thing, but it's just as religious in terms of its framework. It's just as superstitious. It's hyper real. It's full of myths. It's got mythology and miracles. Yeah. So
I just had a thought right now, or about you kind of smirking when you said, well, so demons are making them feel better. It's much like space. You know how many children were moved to tears seeing, why would they be faking space? It's about the inner space. So why would religions lie about what happens when you die? Because there's no need for a resurrection.
Now, I'm not sure where I am on the reincarnation question. I know it's a real common theme, and I see it in quite a lot, but I've thought about that one for some time. I don't think I agree. I don't know. But what do you think about reincarnation?
It's just another form of, spiritualism. And it's affirmed through seances and things where people channel entities that speak and act very much like ancient figures. And, when I was really young, my mom used to be into the New Age. And I was even, when I was like 6 or 7 years old, we went to like this one medium who it's a type of thing where they draw, and she drew my past lives. And I still have this painting of all my past lives, and it's really fun and interesting. But it's more spiritualism, the idea that when you're dead, your life is reincarnated. And mathematically, it doesn't even make sense, right? Does the spirit spread? Like, there are more people in totality than there are lives that have been reincarnated. Mormonism also has the view that we are amnesiac angels living physical body experiences, and we have to remember where we came from. It's all Gnostic.
That's Mormon? That's the exact Kabbalistic doctrine where we're descended from the source, and that you look at the tree of life, it's got the crown at the top, that we're from the celestial realm, but we're down here at the kingdom, at the material, and that there's an amnesic wall, and that the way that you ascend back and integrate, it's like being cast out of Eden. The idea is that there's a separation from God. So the tree of life is the path back up to self-remembrance. And that's a Jungian concept as well, that your ego is a fallen state, a necessary construct and center of consciousness, but it's not your entire being. So in his view, the purpose of psychiatry or even mysticism, alchemy, ritual is all to break the constraints of the false ego construct to make room for the more complete integrated self. And I think that's true. As far as the ego as a construct, as a reflection of societal impositions. And I do think this false self, it's healthy to find out where it's authentic, where it's not, and to integrate more of your real self. I do think there is something to that approach. And I think this is conveyed in more primitive forms in what the mystery schools teach, with the coffin, the death, the resurrection. It's the death of the false self. Like when you're a Mason, they show you a rough stone on the left of the altar and then a cube on the right, perfectly polished brick. And they say, when you get in here, you're a rough stone. But if you go through the process, you become a polished brick fit to be laid up in the edifice of the King Solomon's temple. But it's all just allegory for character development and spiritual development disguised as stonemasonry. And that's the idea behind masonry. The idea, again, is that we're imperfect, but that's part of the process, and that reaching a state of being the polished brick requires death of the old self. And so the master mason goes to the ritual where they're killed in a coffin. They're then pulled out by King Solomon. Well, what does this archaic ceremony do? Well, according to the symbolism here, you're communicating, because what Jung said was that your subconscious speaks in symbols, in archetypes. So if you go through an experience like that subconsciously, it has some sort of an effect of your psychologically actually experiencing death, because your subconscious isn't processing real from fake, but just treats everything the same. So in a sense, the death rituals are meant to be a literal rebirth psychologically, or meant to trigger that.
Yes, and what I say, this is another example of how different the following of Jesus of Nazareth is from that, because he said, "No man puts on a new cloth unto the old garment, for it would just, if you took it off, it would just rip and make it worse. Neither do you put new wine into old wine sacks, for those wine sacks would just break and the wine would run out."
Isn't that gatekeeping? Isn't it gatekeeping saying this religion says you can't do that? And I'm saying this might be necessary.
I'm not talking about a religion. I'm talking
Okay.
about the teachings of Jesus.
Okay, well, isn't Jesus's teachings gatekeeping the idea that you could reach psychic integration by dying to the construct ego that society helps you mold as you are indoctrinated?
What both Jung, Freemasons, and others are saying is that within us we have a capacity. So it'd be like taking a broken garment and kind of sewing on new things onto it, or taking an old bottle. Well, Christ says the entire thing is wrong and you need help from the one who created you. Like I said, all religion is the worship of the creation rather than the creator. And you keep calling Christianity a religion because you think Christ is a created being. And I agree with you. World stage Christianity, Catholic Jesus, Mormon Jesus, American Jesus, those are all creations.
It feels like doublespeak. When you say that Christianity is not a religion, it feels like doublespeak, because every practitioner calls it a religion. And then there are some say...
That's actually one thing you said, because these practitioners, they are not following the teachings of the man, Christ. Like, so are the triangulation. Jesus is being obscured, and what's being replaced is a church hierarchy, a voting for this candidate, fighting against liberal, like, people think being Christian is supporting Donald Trump, or like, you know, going to church and stuff, which I told you even before, church means ecclesia. It's just a body of people.
But doesn't this go back to my original point here, that if you're invalidating the majority of Christians, then your perspective has no grounding, because you can't speak.
I'm not invalidating them. It's just a semantic thing. Because I think I said it before. I think there are Catholics who will be in proper standing with Christ, and there are people like me who won't. Right? I'm not the one who makes the decision. I'm just pointing out like the meanings of words, or any denomination. Like, it's almost like baited out of me from people. They say like, well, what happens to the Hindu who's never had access to the Bible? Isn't that so exclusive? Where are they going? Tell me. And they're like baiting me to act like a Baptist minister screaming in the street saying they're going to hell. And I'm like, you see, you can say that, but you don't know Jesus if you do. I know him. He says that he is the one who individually examines everyone's life. And calling yourself a Christian doesn't mean anything. You must know that from these world stage characters who call themselves Christian, but they don't have the teachings of the Spirit of Christ at all.
But who's the authority on this? Like, why should I take your version of Christianity above Joel Osteen?
It's not mine. It's basically, the authority of it is on the man who was raised from the dead. And if I ever tell you that, Jesus would want us to fight against the world stage directors, to find out, find their names, post them online, and take them out, then you can be with certainty say I'm not Christian, because Jesus said, love those who curse you, right? It's like, pray for those who...
But I guess this is where we get into, this is an appeal to an authority. And again...
I think Christ is an authority on Christianity. Yes.
But I mean, you can't really bring that into an argument where we're remaining strictly focused on objective reality and claim that has any weight here, any more than somebody can claim that the Prophet Muhammad is the be-all, end-all of how to do things and live right.
Yeah, but what I've said is the Mohammedans, they claim that it's the same God, right? That it's a creator God. But in Surah 19, the chapter dedicated to Mary, verse 88, they say that this Allah, God, doesn't have a son, and that Jesus, Isa, if you will, peace be upon him, they even venerate him, that he is not the son of God, he's just an important prophet. that completely goes against what Jesus said time and time again. What people thousands of years before him, right, in the Old Testament, Solomon said, who created who bound the winds in a garment? What is his name and what is his son's name? In the Old Testament, Proverbs 7:3. Like,
so what's Jesus going to
God has
do?
a son.
You said he's the one who judges everybody, and he might judge that some people in church might be good, some might not. Is he going to judge all of the followers of Muhammad?
And the tares. Yeah,
Okay, well, are the followers of Muhammad going to get a pass?
It's not because of them being followers of Muhammad. It's what spirit dwells in them. So, like, when I always say this to people, Jesus said to the young prince said to Jesus, "Good master, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus said, "Why do you call me good? There is none good but one, that is God." And I think I told you before that there's like uppercase G, good, and then lowercase g, good and evil. Right? Christ is truly good because, they had to bring false witnesses against him. He had done no fault. There was no, even Pilate said, "I find no fault in him," right? So
yeah, well, look, we've got people here. A lot of people here are asking some questions, but
I just want to get to that point about like Muslims or
yeah. Someone wants to know, what is your argument here? What is your main argument? Asks Busy.
That because Christ is actually like good, that when a Hindu cares for his wife, when a Muslim helps the poor selflessly with no desire for, winning praise from others, when an atheist laughs with their friends over things that are, actually of God, that is, Christ is there because he is good. And when a so-called Christian molests a child, that's Satan. Do you see how like the profession of someone doesn't mean anything? It's what spirit dictates.
So I could be a Gnostic. I could live my life as a Gnostic, follower of fringe Jungian psychiatry. I could even delve into sorcery and Gnosticism based takes on Christianity. And I still get a golden ticket to heaven because I'm a good guy.
Yeah, because it's not about a ticket or a court case. It's about knowing the new Adam. Like, do you actually know him? And
okay, can Satanists get into heaven if they live really nice lives and very Christ-like lives in every way, except they call themselves Satanists because they like the aesthetics?
Well, here's the problem. They call themselves by nature of calling themselves Satanists. It means that they don't really like Jesus as a person.
But Jesus would let them in anyway if they behave very well, right?
No, it's not about behavior. You see, you're missing the point. It's not about behavior. It's about knowing him. And I'm saying that good behavior cannot exist.
But Muslims wouldn't know him. Muslims wouldn't, like, if you're in a theocratic society and it's all Quran. If it's not in the Quran, it's not part of your curriculum. They don't know him, or they think that he was a phony and faked his death. But even if they behave well, are they going to get a pass?
So you think it's about rendering good works. I'm saying it's not possible. Like, any good behavior a Muslim does, any good thing I've ever done in my life hasn't been me. It has been Christ working through me. Any bad thing I've done, it has been me. Right? So I'm saying it doesn't matter if you're Muslim, Hindu, or whatever. Any good thing, truly good, selfless act you've done, it is divine. That's what I'm saying. It's like, that's what...
In your opinion, in your framework. But we can't, again, we're not starting with the assumption that you've got the right version and this is it, because there's too many different takes on it for us to give you special pleading.
You're saying it's my version. It's what...
Well, you're giving us an appeal to an authority. You're saying it's not you, you're appealing to this, but we all know that every person who cracks the Bible has a different take on it. There's no uniformity.
Yeah, just like there are different people who know you. Like, do people know you and talk to you and meet you? Sure, great. We all come from different backgrounds, but there is people that know you, and there's people who don't, right? It's that simple. There are people who are like, that's basically, it's not about their behavior. It's not about that. It's like, do they actually acknowledge, that there is good in the world that doesn't come from within? And your position is that good can come from within. I say it comes from above, and that there is no such thing.
Okay.
It's good coming purely from...
I guess, see, that's where I disagree. I mean, you can say that's true for you, but like, it's like when people say these synchronicities are the signs of the universe is winking at you. It's like, they may believe the universe, whatever that means, is communicating to them, but I'm saying, no, it's part of your own psychology that you haven't integrated into your egoic awareness, and it seems like it's coming from without. So I'm really not about to externalize what I do and give credit externally. Like I'm not there. I don't believe in it. It doesn't make sense to me logically. Like I'm in control of my own actions. And if I'm supposed to believe that my good deeds are actually done by a third party through me, that I'm possessed or something, that's a little hard for me to accept.
I don't think it's that we're possessed, it's we work with the master. And that, like, in a way, we're all, what is it? If I were to use a builder analogy, because Christ was a builder, I'm sure you've heard that as a mason. It's like, oh, wow, Jesus was a carpenter. What it is Antonio Stradivari violins are like some of the most expensive violins ever. And people are like, how did they work, right? And only recently they discovered the reason why his violins sound so amazing and great is because the wood he used for his violins were actually warped by seawater. He deliberately chose warped seawater wood and would sand that down and use that to make his Stradivari violins, which are worth so much money. That analogy is like we are the warped wood, warped by a life of sin, and Christ is the master craftsman.
I think I see what you're saying. I think most people, though, are going to hear this as proselytizing, which is...
Sure. And if you reject it, that's fine, but just know that the only case I'm making, world stage Catholicism, Christianity, Mormonism is not biblical Christianity. And if you think that the idea of a literal resurrection is foolish, please just say that. It's just like people feel, I don't know, bigoted or small-minded.
What do you mean? Wait. Do you find it foolish that Prometheus was chained to a rock and had an eagle eating his liver every day?
Yes. I think if you believe that literally, then it's like, yes. Then that
because
is
I categorize this stuff as, I think these are myths. I'm not saying it's foolish. I think these are myths. Attempts to explain things. I don't believe...
The exoteric is for the profanes.
I don't believe that Christianity is historic. I don't think Jesus existed.
Sure.
I don't have reasons to believe so.
And you don't need to. But please don't think it has an exoteric and esoteric interpretation.
It does. I'm not the one who wrote the rules here.
Yeah.
There are mystery schools.
Sure.
And in fact, didn't Christianity start off as something as a mystery school, as a small group? Didn't it have some structure that was more like that than not? I mean, I think this is...
How so? But no, why don't you elaborate on how so?
Well, it's a separate conversation, but I'm saying, like, when Christianity formed... Okay, wait.
Well, that's my problem, Tim. It's always implication.
No, I'm asking you... Okay, well, Christianity...
Didn't Jesus teach in parables? On parables, don't they have exoteric and esoteric? No, they don't. It's just surface truth and then deeper truth.
Look, I'm not a believer in Christianity, Mormonism. I don't believe in Islam. I don't believe Jesus existed. I think that all religions are constructs of the state to control the masses. That's my take on it based on the available evidence. You don't have evidence. You don't have evidence for your claims. You don't have evidence for your claims.
I have evidence for the claim that Christianity is not a state, teaching. That it's a religion based because the teachings of Christ were so contrary to that.
But your premise is based on Christ having existed and having been the son of a...
No. Pretend maybe Christ didn't exist. His teachings, which do exist, we can agree on that, do not affirm, like when Atwill used the render unto Caesar that which he sees render to God, which is God's, wow, profound evidence. It was created by these Flavian Roman emperors to convert Jews. Ridiculous, because read 2 verses before and after, Christ was talking about separation of church and state, and his followers who held fast to that teaching were executed by Rome.
But you're operating on the premise that these things were actually said. Like, I mean, look, to me, this is mythology, not theology. I don't know where we can go with this. I mean, you're a true believer, and you believe this stuff, and I understand that. I am not a believer. We're not going to have the same grounds because we have different standards of evidence, though. Your standards of evidence are largely faith-based, and mine are based on evidence. And I don't trust the media any more than I trust religions.
I don't think context is faith. Right, like the context in which that verse is from. I don't think saying that the Pharisees are trying to trick him, and that people who did not worship the emperor like Jesus taught and were killed for it, I don't think that's faith. I think that's just, reality. And I think actually it's faith and belief to say that the Gospels were written as Roman propaganda to convert.
Well, that's one guy's take. That's Joseph Atwill's take. That's his theory. But I think what we're talking about here
is it's falsifiable, and I'm just falsifying it. Of course, I do have a bias.
Well, your bias isn't even falsifiable. If you're faith-based, there's nothing that can prove it. You're not operating with a falsifiable model, so you can't be intellectually honest. We can't put this in the same category as media analysis, because media analysis, we're looking at media, propaganda, and real-world events, and you're citing what I consider to be mythology, and you consider to be supernatural events in history.
Sure, and all I'm saying is whether mythology or supernatural events in history, what is shown on the world screen is not the same. Like, it's not even close. It's not even inspired by that mythology or that historical event, which I believe is fairly well established.
Well, I have nothing to do with what the mainstream media psyops do, but the fact that they're constantly putting certain archetypes and motifs into movies, borrowing from Christianity and other sources, that's just objectively what they do. That is just observable. You may not like that they have.
No, I agree with you.
Like, for example, I'm watching Frankenstein, the new Frankenstein movie, and yeah, clearly they're making these analogies with his arms out, Christ-like. They are doing these things. We often see movies like Superman as a sun god savior, and this is commonly, we see examples like the movie Wall-E, where they put Noah's myth in a modern science fiction context. And then we see how Noah warns us of the floods, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration warning us of the floods. I'm like, that's like Noah's myth. So I see a lot of syncretism. So syncretism is endemic to the world stage scripts because it works, because they're like kind of like with Serapis, where you take several gods from several regions, you merge them into one, you create some super god, and now everybody's on the same sheet. And I see that's a constant process. They're using syncretism to get all these views consolidated.
Sure, and what I argue is that in the same way we've identified the world stage in our day, and as we trace it back through time, we're starting to see that maybe it's much longer than the United States. It might even be in these ancient religions. So we've identified the scaffolding of the world stage. All I'm doing is like, what is the play about? It's about control, but I'm saying like, whose control are they usurping from? Why is it that ancient Egyptian and Sumerian mythologies have resurrection imagery? Why is it that, Buddhism, a Hindu prince lowered himself? So all these things before Jesus, yet are mocking Jesus even before he was born? How is that possible? Oh, it is possible because from the very beginning it was promised the seed of the woman would crush the serpent's head. If you date it only by the written text, like 1400 BC with Moses, you're forgetting spoken truth, or you're putting truth to paper, like it's limited by paper. I'm saying truth, it has no, shelf life. It has no time. It's like truth is always true. It doesn't matter if 99.9% of so-called Christians start worshiping the Mormon Jesus. It still doesn't make it correct. And just because it's been syncretized and abused in all of the world religions, even predating Jesus, it still doesn't make it any less valid. Right? That's the only point I'm saying. Is like all these things are true. I'm agreeing with you with syncretism and the use of manipulating.
Well, look, full disclosure. I told you I was invited to an event. I was invited to a Gnostic Catholic mass that was performed publicly, and I walked away from it because I went to Catholic masses my entire life. I walked away from that convinced that there's something going on in this world, that there is something ancient, and that the public versions of religions are probably exoteric and have a lot of significant parts cut out of them. But I think it's ultimately pantheism in many ways. I think it's very pantheistic.
Yeah, the worship of the creation rather than the creator.
The word might be panentheism, but the idea is that, that there's this universal consciousness in everything, and that it can be, I guess, seen as the universe itself and in every. I mean, it's a very common way of looking at things. I think, like this concept of God or a singular entity that permeates everything. I'm kind of the mind of like panpsychism, where the universe is inherently consciousness itself, not just a end product of a Big Bang process. I have this theory about the Big Bang as well as other way of looking at it, but it's a separate topic, completely separate. Because again, I'm not going off of scriptures. I'm going off of my experiences. and my daily experiences. And as my life has progressed, the various events of my life have seemingly led me somewhere. And it's really got me thinking outside of the bounds of conventional scripture and religions. That's why, like, I'm not trying to be dismissive of Christians or Christianity, but to me, I think these are all part of, I guess, attempts, perhaps, of explaining the universe by way of archetypes and symbols and mimicry. And, it's very artful, but I don't think that religions are the final statement on man's place in the universe. And not even like psychiatry and our understanding of the human mind is relatively recent, subconscious motivations. So I think we're really kind of in a new age here. And I don't think we're even at the end of it. So I kind of think that religions are prematurely claiming to know it all. And I don't think it's all there. I don't think that the Bible has all the wisdom that I need for my own life. I kind of think that a lot of what I've come across I don't think it's there.
I don't claim to know it all, and I don't claim the Bible has all the answers. I claim who it talks about does. And he can teach you things, meet you where you are. And he does it through what you would call syncs or supernatural experiences. Because I hope you know that, like, the same collection of texts that condemns divination or speaking to the dead also has prophets with visions, has Elijah calling down pillars of fire, has people being raised from the dead, which are to be taken literally. But the Gnostics and others will say, actually, here's the symbolic teaching of it. It's much like a narc where they take a drop of truth and then mix it in with an ocean of lies.
Well, I don't have any evidence for the claims of religion, and that's where I'm stuck at. I don't have evidence of the claims of mainstream media. So I recognize that there are worldviews and there's the real world. And I have this off-world stage perspective. I'm very agnostic about the media itself these days. I'm slow to believe, but I have I have the same perspective on religion. And
so I'll give you a perspective about the power of prophecy. Over a year ago, we had a similar conversation. It was very passionate, very debated. And I had warned you. I said, what you saw at 7:13 with the 6:11 Ephesians, like Ephesians 6:11, the religious syncretism you'll see on the world, and like, it's only going to get worse, Tim. And I even said, in that moment, I was so moved. I said, like, this is a message from God. Well, we're now more than a year later, and it's absolutely happening with the Charlie Kirk stuff. And what I noticed is in the early 2000s, with the rise of, like, Richard Dawkins and the Amazing Atheist, there was that attack on the Bible from the atheists. Now we're seeing a new attack on the Bible, but from so-called Christians. I hope you know that Mormons, their article of faith, they believe they don't hold the Bible in the highest regard. They think it's been corrupted by the Catholic Church, that great and abominable church. If the MAGA band, who rammed his truck into that, Mormon LDS church, the LDS Church in Michigan, again, it's like they're not real Christians. So this idea that you hold the scriptures in high regard, it gets attacked from all angles. And the people who claim to be zealots, beating you over the head with Bible verses, they themselves are also misusing it, right? The letter kills, but the spirit quickens. It's like I've been with the people who misrepresent me and think I don't worship the Bible. I just see it as a way of a record and testing and saying, like, does this actually hold true to the spirit of what we're talking about? And I've been saying for so many years, Tim, for more than 5 years, that false Christianity will take over. Now, I did have the view that the Catholic Church will take over. I think I've changed on that. But it is happening, where the pendulum is swinging the other way, and it's going to be absolutely awful. It's going to be the worst thing ever. And we're only seeing it. It's only going to get worse. So understanding I recommend everyone here, please at least understand the Book of Mormon as it is, to be able to decode the kind of nonsense we're going to
now, shouldn't I get a Mormon on, just to be fair, and let the Mormon give their take on everything you've said? Because we have to remember too that we have to presume here that you have a bias, since you're coming at this as a Christian talking about the Mormons. And then we should get a Muslim in here and then talk about how you're wrong and the Mormons are wrong. Then we get a Scientologist who can correct us all.
I think they would agree that it's a different God. Well, Mormons won't, but a Muslim would agree that the God I worship is a different God, because I believe my God has a son. They say God doesn't have a son. Now, Mormons, this is the interesting thing. I have actually a couple of online friends I'm still friends with who are Mormons, and I've visited LDS Sunday services. I've had coworkers who are LDS and stuff. They are adamant about denominations around the world is like a shattered plate, and they are restoring the true faith that was lost in the first century. So if you want to talk about mystery school Christianity, absolutely Mormonism.
Doesn't every
no.
denomination, every pastor, every believer believe that they have the right version? Like, that's kind of how these things work, I think, is that the standards of claiming to be it are so low that everybody claims to be it.
That's a truism, right? Everyone thinks they're right. That doesn't mean that I'm wrong, right? Like, do you see what I'm saying? It's a truism what you're stating. I get that, but what I tell you to evaluate is what do they then teach? You will know a tree by its fruits. And the pageantry, which Mormonism does have with its temples and churches, and their Melchizedek priesthood, that's where you receive the temple garments, it is essentially like American Catholicism. They think that there's a separate temples for Christians in the Melchizedek priesthood. And Catholics, you know, the Catholic Church also has the priests in the Catholic Church are a part of the Melchizedek priesthood. Both of them are referencing the character in Genesis that Abraham gave tithes to. Would it shock you that in the New Testament, Paul talking about that scene, he says that was a type pointing to Jesus as our high priest in heaven, not any earthly priesthood. So again, it's like when I study all of these religions, I start to find similarities among them in how they pervert the text, how they deviate from it. I don't just study all these different.
Can you put a number on it? Like,
how wrong they are, and
what percentage of Christians are doing it right? And I'm talking about all denominations.
I don't have a number. I don't have a number.
Could you say 1%?
I'm not being what's it called? I'm not being disingenuous. I'm not being disingenuous. I'm not trying to dodge the question. I mean, I really don't know.
Could you give us a ballpark? Okay, 90% of them. 90% of all the believers in all denominations, Mormon included, even all the God believers, out of all the world's God believers, are 99.9% perfect and on spot, doing it right? No. You wouldn't argue 99%. Would you say 90%?
I mean, I don't. Listen, Tim, it's like I don't want to be oversimplifying or reducing to numbers, but
I think you can quantify it.
I don't know people.
How many people have the right perspective if it's 5%?
Hey, you know what? You know what I can do? Instead of giving you fake numbers that I make up in my mind, I can say what Jesus said. The two will be in the field, and one will be taken, and one will be left on at his second coming. When he returns, right, there'll be two in bed together. One will leave, and one will. So I don't know the numbers, but it truly is people you would not expect. Jesus visited the evil tax collector Zacchaeus, and he converted him, and it was an amazing thing. And the first thing the Pharisees said is, "Oh, how can this Jesus of Nazareth? How is he the Son of God? Doesn't he know what an evil man Zacchaeus is?" That's the thing. It's like I don't know all these people. I don't know what percentage of them, because I don't judge people based on their relationship with God by their actions. I don't know their whole life, but I can acknowledge their doctrines, their teachings. You will know a tree by its fruits. And when they start teaching things that are like, "Oh, you're a true Christian if you want to bomb Israel, or if you want to vote for this candidate," directly opposing Jesus' teachings, right? Jesus never appealed to statecraft. Never appealed to statecraft. Never appealed to priestcraft. Instead, he only appealed to his Father. And in fact, if anything, he condemned priestcraft.
So then Christian nationalists are all doing it wrong. We can at least remove them.
They are, I'm not going to say, okay, you know what? Right or wrong, I'll say it's not as Jesus taught, because Jesus fled from people who wanted to crown him. He said to Satan, to Pilate, "My kingdom is not of this world." When Satan offered him all the kingdoms of the world, Jesus denied it.
But in the end, from your perspective, and I know you're really passionate about this and you believe this, though, in the end of it, though, if there's no hell, and if only Jesus can judge, and if we're good or we do things right according to his rules or whatever, we're good anyway, what does it matter?
It's not about doing things right. It's about acknowledging that we are incapable of doing good, and then seeing that there's only one human being.
But what does it matter if people adopt Christianity as you practice it or not, if they're all going to get the results anyway?
Then the fruits of the Spirit can manifest. You'll have more patient, kind, loving, charitable people. Jesus said that there's such a thing as false charity. When the Pharisees gave to charity, they sounded the trumpet, wanted everyone to know how much they're giving. Jesus would call that evil, while someone like you would say, "Oh, it's pretty good. They're giving to charity." So do you see, it's like there's such a thing as false charity, as false good.
But if my intentions are good, then I'm fine. Like, there's no hell, though. If there's no hell, then what's the problem?
I never said that there's no hell. I just said that what occurs is, in this eternal life only comes from a union with God.
What if I don't want eternal life? Like, what if I don't want?
Great, then you get. Actually, I've always heard this said before. It's quite interesting. The idea of eternal hellfire is an inversion of heaven, because in heaven there is, as it said, the presence of God in Christ is a consuming fire that always provides light. There's no need for a sun or a temple. And ironically, Satan has twisted that to say, actually, that's eternal hellfire. And I think it's funny, if someone truly doesn't like Jesus, maybe he thinks he's boring, and he thinks his teachings are boring, and he's not interesting, it would be like hell to be in heaven.
I see.
Everyone gets what they want. No extra time, no extra period of probation would change it. That's why I think eventually someone's life,
I think that if I were to, like, I think it's too late for me. Like, I missed the bus. If I was going to be a religious person, I would have had to have been hit with it when I was very young. But I was skeptical. Like, you know, I was raised Catholic, but I never believed it. I was always alienated by it. I was always just thought it was weird and alien to me. And I used to smuggle books into church, and I'd put it in the mission, the daily mission, and I would be pretending like I was really into church, but I would use it to read novels. And I never rocked the boat, but I never believed. I detested catechism. I didn't mean any of it. I thought communion was nasty, but I liked the donuts and the coffee and joking around with friends. But I never believed it.
You're a seeker. Aren't you a seeker? By the way, I was also raised Catholic. If you were a seeker, I always found the pageantry and the massive, cathedrals and opulent displays of wealth, and not like the Jesus that my parents would tell me about. It's like, imagine Jesus riding into Jerusalem on a donkey, right, barefoot with his disciples. And I'll juxtapose that with the Pope riding into the Vatican in his bulletproof car with parades of people and, just confetti and everything going everywhere. It's a night and day difference. Yet the Vicar of Christ, or the Pope, is the human representative of Jesus. I always felt like there's some occulting, some misrepresentation of that guy, Jesus. And even when I became an atheist, I still said, I'm going to teach my children the Gospels, because that Jesus character in that fictional story, he still has some good teachings. In fact, Thomas Jefferson published a version of the Gospels called The Teachings of Jesus of Nazareth that removed all the miracles. And they thought, here are the moral teachings of Jesus. The problem is, it's impossible to manifest those moral teachers without the Spirit of God, because there's none good but one, in him. Even in The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins, he claimed charity was a genetic misfire, a defect. He said there's no way that, because always everything we do in the evolutionary paradigm is to sustain the race or to continue improving, right? So he really had no answer, so he denied the existence of charity. Would it shock you that the Greek translation of the verse, God is love, it should more accurately be translated to as God is charity? Like a true, selfless, loving character that does something with no expectation in return, that is supernatural, that is divine. People think of divine and supernatural as like telekinesis or, calling pillars of fire. True supernatural power is an untainted character that does and serves others with no desire for something in return.
Altruism.
Yes, true altruism is divine and supernatural. And coincidentally, Catholicism and all these, that's not altruistic, right? The term raking in the dough comes from the Catholic Church when they passed the papal bull.
But all the Catholics that I know have been altruistic, helpful, kind people.
Yes, and that goes back to what I said earlier. It's not about your denomination.
But saying this is
relationship.
They did it because of their upbringing and stuff. I get that. But anyway, I've also met just as many Christians who've just been nasty, bigoted, racist, anti-Semitic, closed-minded, bullies, narcissists, drunks. I mean, it runs the gamut. So it's like the label hardly means anything.
Breaking the third commandment. Don't use the Lord's name in vain. Don't people think that means it's like when you stub your toe, don't say Jesus? No, using the Lord's name in vain is invoking the name of Christ while also being nasty, mean, a bully, a narcissist, all these things. and say, well, actually, I'm better than you. I'm holier than thou.
Oh, I
That
see.
is a true violation of the third commandment.
Well, again, I guess I hope everyone has enjoyed the conversation. Personally, I feel like religion has never been my thing, or not religion has never been my thing, or belief systems contained in scriptures have never been my thing. I've become a very objectivist type person, and in my own experiences, I take things in as the world is a very Gnostic approach here, as in I I do think there's this essential duality. I believe in evil and good, and I don't really have room in my picture here for anything that I haven't experienced myself. So Jesus isn't really part of it, nor is Satan. But I do think there is some kind of intrinsic light versus dark built into this place. I think there's a spiritual component, but I don't have all the answers, and I don't think any religion does either.
Yeah, and I agree. And I know then you think that's me being what's it called disingenuous or misrepresenting by saying it's not, Christian following the resurrected Jesus is not a religion, right? It's like I hold fast to that. I don't change. It's not binding me to this world. It's actually freeing me from the systems of this world. That's the point. And you want to talk about precognition? Jesus said, "He who commits sin is the servant of sin." Jesus, when he talked about free will, he didn't say it was binary. Either you have it or you don't. He actually described it as the more you sin, the more predictable your behavior becomes. Like your free will is being taken away from you. So the farther away you get from God, the more controllable you become. And with these deep learning models that are extracting people's online activities, soon they'll be able to fake precognition or, being able to tell fake prophecies based on someone's online activity and how they behave and how they react to certain videos. Right? Kind of like Philip K. Dick's characters with precog in his books. All of these, they're basically making a facsimile of secular versions of miracles from the Bible. We already have the day of Pentecost emulated with 11 labs, where if you take a recording and now your voice can be in any language, much like the day of Pentecost. We already have deepfake necromancy, which I warned about 3 years ago, right, in a video I sent you. I'm not sure if you watched, but it's like, I talked about it 3 years ago, and now we have deepfake departed people that everyone's talking to, even though they don't think that it's actually their spirit. It achieves the same result. Because they're like, wow, this deepfake model is based on all of their private writings and their online activity. This is what they would have said, right? It doesn't matter if they don't think it's actually the spirit of the person. They still think this is what they would have said.
Right.
True to dead. And that's the problem, is we're going to get to that very, very soon.
Well, and I think this is an interesting conversation. I always stumble on one thing, though, which is the starting point. Because you have to have agreed upon definitions. And when you say God, there's a lot of assumptions built into it. Like, it's not the Muslim God. It's not the Buddhist God. It's not the New Age universe. So, like, we have to get very specific in the terms. And then when you have a very specific God, well, now we're taking an evidence-free claim and making that the starting point, as though it's been demonstrated to be true and real.
I try to reel in my perspective. It's just what you call the world stage, I call the prophets of Baal. And instead of the world stage, actors, I call them manifesting prophecies on our screen, because that happened in the days of Elijah, where they would fake miracles and prophecies, working with King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. It's happening, and that's the last verse of the Old Testament. I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and dreadful day of the Lord, or the second coming of Christ. And if you want to know what defines my God, he's the creator of heaven and earth, the sea, and all the fountains of water, and he sent his only begotten Son into the world to redeem mankind from the bondage of sin. That's it. So I can make those. Not a single other religion is like that. Don't tell me Hercules is the son of Zeus. Don't tell me not a single one of them have, God's only begotten Son infusing with human nature and gifting them the ability to do good. Not a single one of these other religions have that.
Yeah, I guess you're right about that. It's definitely unique. And this is far from over. I mean, this is a never-ending conversation, but I'm not a religious person. I never will be. And I think that I agree with Cygirl. Religion's a mechanism for social control, and I guess I get it. You're not in a religion, but I find that to be a very troublesome thing. I still don't understand it, how, because I think you can take the story out of the. I mean, you could take the Bible out of the institution, but can you take the worldview, the institution's worldview, out of that? I don't know. I don't know if you can separate it. I mean, you seem to.
The reason, I'm not being facetious when I say, like, I'm not religious, because, like, religare means to rebind. Well, it's like the freedom of, my faith is not based on the rudiments of the world. Like, I don't visit the Shroud of Turin and go, wow, this is how it's real. And this is very important for the future of fakery. They might do excavations or digs in South America or in parts of the country, and they might find parts of Zarahemla. The LDS president might walk out of the Salt Lake Temple holding the golden plates, because in the official Book of Mormon, Joseph Smith gave it back to the angel Moroni. It might come back, right?
Oh yeah, relics are not new. I mean, how many different churches had fragments of the cross? And yeah, Shroud of Turin. For some reason, people believe in the Shroud of Turin, which is absurd. But but then again,
because their faith is based on the rudiments of the world, right? They're moved by public displays, pageantry, little artifacts and stuff. I don't care if people try to show unequivocal proof that Muhammad is the real prophet. I like Jesus more than Muhammad, and I believe him when he says he's the Son of God. Like, his teachings are reflective of the same God of the Old Testament, contrary to popular belief. Right? As it is written, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked. Turn ye from your evil ways, for why will you die? Oh, but didn't he do the flood and to Sodom and Gomorrah? Yeah, you're accusing God. Have you ever asked what kind of people there were living at those times? Infants? What's quite interesting is you should look at that and go, wow, maybe there is such a thing as a fallen nature. And there is a God who knows the end from the beginning, that when he, decides to destroy something, it's like, a snake doesn't become a snake when it bites someone. It's a snake by birth, by its origin, right? So it's like, maybe when God makes these decisions, it's actually good because he is good. But if you accuse him, you're presupposing that those people were actually pretty undeserving of that. They didn't deserve that. Something to keep in mind, right?
Well,
and by the way, you keep mentioning Noah, like Noah is a syncretized versions of Noah's myth. Well, if you knew the real record, God promised he would never flood the world again with the rainbow. So by definition, if you actually knew God, you would never fall for the
well,
you'd never fall for the time change.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. Exactly, like that. That is a story that it would not happen again. That's why they showed the rainbow. Anyway, I hope people at least learned a lot from listening to you. I try to give you the best, I guess, setups to answer in the way that you can to clarify your positions. We don't have to agree on anything at all to get all of the. No, in fact, it's actually useful not to, because if we just agreed, we might not have any kind of real dialogue that brings up questions that other people may have had before and have never actually asked or heard answered. So appreciate the call, and we will continue this conversation, I'm sure.
Thank you, and sorry for talking so long, but yeah, always love the show. IPS forever, and talk to you guys later. So,
all right, have a great night. All right, that's Leo Pirate. Cygirl says Old and New Testament sanction chattel slavery. Cygirl says, may the force be with you. Diana Southward says, I believe Jesus is real, but he's already come. I've heard that one too. This little season thing, I've heard that. Very interesting. Look, my newest take, and I know this isn't popular, but I truly think that the God of the Bible is the demiurge, not Satan. Because I think Satan is mostly a literary construct. Because Satan is an office. Satan is the accuser. Like I am a Satan. Like we're Satans here. We're the accusers of mainstream media. The Satan is a role, not a person. Lucifer is the devil. That's mostly literary creation, mostly a literary thing. And you look at these syncretized myths as they've evolved, and they aren't really strictly biblical. Like that's certainly true that the world stage misrepresents the Bible, and that was its core message by calling in here is to point out that the Christianity we see depicted on the world stage is likely warped. The beheaded one says, there's a new face online talking like IPS, talking about the psyop apocalypse. Send me a link. We need to network with the people who've seen through. And I'm not platforming any particular religion. If you're a Muslim or a Mormon or a Scientologist and you want to tell everybody from your point of view, I have to be open to it, to be fair. For me to platform any particular religious view, I have to be open to any views, including mainstream media and media. When somebody says God, though, intellectual honesty requires that you pause and you say, which God? You can't stop yourself because it's offensive. Because, like, what do you mean there's only one God? No, you have to say, which God? Because even people who believe in the one God will say, well, their God is not the God. So there's like, okay, well, which God then? And again, I'm at this point too with this where I trust my own experience, my own thoughts, my own results, and essentially my own trajectory through this place. And I do get what I consider to be guidance. I think there's a purpose to it, 100%. I don't think it's random. I think the universe is made of information, but I have not found my perspectives mirrored in any of the conventional religions or holy books. I haven't seen any of the answers that I've sought. I haven't found my answers in any holy books. In fact, I've consistently found that the religious paradigms are inimical to what I'm doing, to where I'm thinking, where my mind goes, the questions that I ask. I find similar disagreements with New Age. Like, I have not found, quote, truth or source. I haven't found the source truth other than my own reasoning and thinking and observations. And so I trust myself. I don't outsource my spirituality. I certainly don't outsource my worldview anymore. And so I'm mostly, you could say agnostic. I used to say I was agnostic, but I don't say that anymore because that's in denial of the experiences that I've had. And the experiences I've had, as in I've experienced the presence of evil. And I have also experienced what I consider to be the sublime, profound instances of what I would consider to be good, or the opposite of objectively. I guess, the word evil is kind of vague. And so my view is very Manichaean. Like, I do think there's something inherently different about man that makes us different from apes. Like, we're not just apes with big egos hurling through the universe until this whole thing just stops moving. I think it's more dynamic than that. I have this take on the Big Bang, but I don't want to get started on it now. We're like 3 hours in. But I do have this different take. Like, my view of the universe is far from static, grinding to a halt. And I don't think that the universe exists until we experience it, or it's coming into being as we experience it, as are we. Like, I think that we are essentially light condensing into matter or incarnating into matter, but I think it's an ongoing process. And this might sound strange, but like, when it comes to the dead, I don't think of the dead as in the past, like past tense, but outside time and space, which is a little different. Tim, can you elaborate on the presence of evil? I could, but I've talked to like moral relativists who I think are disgusting when they can't describe an evil act because they don't believe in it. And I certainly could. It's a whole other conversation. If you don't believe in evil, then good for you. Like, I hope you sleep well at night. But I would say this. I think that there seems to be, that's why I said Manichaeism, this notion that the world itself is darkness, and darkenment, as in the world wants you to succumb to the material. that you're maybe just a byproduct of your physical body, and your ego is just a center of awareness, but it's biological in origin. And then when your body dies, you're gone. I reject that. I think that's the world stage perspective, and that's the one they want us to have to reduce us so we don't attain what I consider to be psychic integrity, as in a fully integrated consciousness, which includes the transpersonal, higher self, the not necessarily non-corporeal, like there's a split. See, I don't think there's a dualism split like spirit matter. I think it's a continuity. I think we are spirit and matter, not spirit in matter. Like we're not like separate from spirit, but that it's a continuum. And I think that part of us that is not yet incarnated is in that place we think of as the future, which is just the yet to be, and that we are coming into existence with every breath, with every moment. But what I'm saying isn't conventional religious thought, but I have this model that I want to explain at some other point that I think can account for most of what gets relegated to paranormal and synchronicity, and explains consciousness outside of the egoic awareness. Donna Southard says, I've been listening to Jung and Stoicism videos. I consider myself saved by Christ, but I've experienced stuff from different perspectives. Right. Well, I'm very much like disinclined to trust the holy books for a lot of reasons. Most of it my own experiences. And, you know, like I said, full disclosure, I'm a seeker. So I've never really joined a religion and then stood on it as this is my faith for life. I'm very open-minded. I'm open to the possibility that none of these perspectives we've been handed are correct. I don't think that we have a platform. I mean, even now, just considering the false worldview and the government-approved religions, everything's got to be, in my view, exoteric, made palatable for the public. And I think we live in darkness. I think we live in abysmal ignorance. And I don't think we have enough information to arrive at conclusions. So to me, it's an open question. I'm still a seeker. I'm not a believer. What's the difference? Well, a believer has answers. And if their answers are right, good for them. But if you think you have the answers, you may not have any incentive to continue seeking. In fact, seeking after having been given the answers might be prohibited. It's apostasy, heresy. Maybe like I'd be a heretic. Infinite Plane Radio.
Yo, what's up, Tim?
Hey, what's up, caller?
I know you're talking about religion and stuff, and all it does is cause division, and everybody thinks that they're right. But the reason I was calling was today was the anniversary of JFK. Leading up to this, we've had all these news stories kind of tying into the JFK. A couple days ago, there was a mass shooting at Walmart in Dallas. Then you have Kash Patel, which is the FBI, testifying and lying in front of Congress that he don't know Stu Peters, which is a conspiracy agent, if you ask me. So you have that in the news. Then last night at midnight, you have Candace Owens saying that she's going to be taken out, and she was the one that was supposed to be shot when they were calling Charlie Kirk the new JFK. And I just want to know your take on this.
Yeah, we talked about this the first hour. I'm glad we're getting back to it because they branded the CK thing as a JFK. Like that was their doing. And this is continued unabated. They made the correlation on purpose because it's a recycled psyop. This was a JFK event for this particular generation. And Candace's role is to create a new generation of conspiracy theorists that could be laughed at, marginalized, yet they're given enough to make them think that they're right. And there's enough doubt deliberately put out there to make it appear that there might be a cover-up. And that's all they need to maintain the existence of the conspiracy side of things. So I think that this is all part of a reboot of the JFK thing, the killing and the follow-up and the generation of limited hangout conspiracy culture for the new generation. I think it's all, and then Candace saying that Israeli trained assassins working for the French were going to take her out, but got Charlie first. If true, then that's an act of war. It's a very significant thing. And that's what she's asserted. And so what I think is happening is her credibility is being publicly destroyed so that they can basically attack everybody who didn't go with the official story.
Yeah, but her story is not the real story. We know he's still alive. Do you know what I mean? She ain't doing that good of an investigation.
Another point, that she's not an investigator. She's reading narratives according to a timeline. They probably had a calendar. And for these 34 days, 35 days it's been, it's on 34 episodes, that you're just going to blame second shooter, blame third shooter, blame Israel, blame Macron. That she's only out there disseminating alternative explanations, but she is by no means investigating. And if you think she's investigating, you're being fed a steady trail of breadcrumbs down a well-paved rabbit trail. And then also, looking how far back in advance this event necessarily would have been planned, we can pretty much rule in that she knows Charlie's alive. So she's also a gatekeeper.
What's your take on Marjorie Taylor Greene saying she's running for presidency?
Oh, she said that? I was listening to her 10-minute video. I got through half of it, 5 minutes of grievance mongering and patting herself in the back, and I turned it off. I didn't know she announced that. What a joke.
Yes. She said she's considering running. And then, so I'm wondering, is it going to be Erica Kirk and J.D. Vance versus Marjorie Taylor Greene and whoever the next idiot is that they pick?
Wow. Now, I think Erica Kirk likely will run, and I'm basing that off of the conjecture. Immediately after Charlie Kirk's death, she was brought up as being a VP candidate after she showed up on TV at the memorial. And then J.D. Vance has been very close to her. And then, of course, Heads of State has VP Kirk, played by the actress who was next to Charlie Kirkland when he was shot in the neck in Snake Eyes. So looking at the predictive and concurrent programming basis, we haven't seen the end of her. And I think it is likely that she will likely be in that. But Marjorie Taylor Greene, I don't know what her appeal is. She's midway between neocon and woke right. She's not really clearly defined enough on either side. So I don't think she has anything. But her main way of getting attention is claiming that she's getting swatted. So she's always been a panderer to the QAnon base. But I don't know. I'm surprised. I thought maybe her expiration date had passed and that she was just signing off. I didn't know she's going to stick around.
Oh, she's going to be a big player. You got to think. We've had two blondes running for president, and vice president, potentially. And then Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's known as, a bodybuilder, and she's all fit. And then you got Erica Kirk, that she's all wealthy as hell. But they also said that Marjorie Taylor Greene's worth $41 million right now, which just blows my mind how these people get into position and then all of a sudden they're wealthy all of a sudden.
That's why I shut her off. She was talking about how her friends are talking about how they can't put groceries on the table. So she's acting like she's got these, lower middle class concerns about money and grocery bills, and she's sitting on $41 million. It's like Tucker Carlson and others, like they pretend like they're not elitist scum and they're just one of us because they're throwing out these ridiculous, ignorant conspiracy theories. She's no different. Unbelievable.
Well, Tim, I'll let somebody else call in. There was a couple people that wanted to call in. I'll make it short and sweet, dude. You know what I mean?
All right. Well, hey, thanks for the call. And appreciate that. And we'll continue to talk about the JFK-ification of Charlie Kirk, which is all by design.
And then you got to think, too, there's a lot of people just destroying the whole MAGA movement, man, from the inside, outside. It's like going to be disbanded where Make America Great is not making America great again.
Yeah.
Thanks for the answer, Tim.
Yep.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Yeah, I think MAGA is definitely being WTC7. They're pulling it. The schism on the right has been extremely pronounced since 10/7, where now the term woke right has been normalized. But I called it out before as red pill wokeism. But when you look at the political horseshoe, you can see the structure, left and right. And the whole MAGA thing was uniting at a point because it had the woke right thinking that the mainstream Republicans under Trump were fighting the deep state, which is code for Israel. But that never really happened. Then you got the leader of America First, Groyper, basically an anti-Trump. So it just looks to me like they're done with it, or it's going to go. Shout out to Michael. Appreciate the super chat there. I don't see if there's a message attached. Sometimes you can leave a message. As I appreciate all the channel support and comments and callers. And I know religious conversations can get a little circular. Because the thing is with debates in general is you should really expect that there's not going to be a point of agreement between the two sides, that each side is just presenting their best views. And so it's really for the benefit of the listeners. Ollie Goering says, I'm chuckling at the furry narrative. Oh yeah, the lone furry nuts, or the lone nut furries. Lone wolf shooters are now lone furries. I think the furries are being unfairly maligned here, getting dragged into this. It's just apolitical. Like, I don't like politics. I don't like mainstream culture. I'm going to dress up in animal costumes with my friends and go to conventions and watch anime. Like, it's very escapist. So you have this escapist group, very artful, doing their own thing. And now they're being demonized as terrorists. Like, furries are now a terrorist organization. Adamski says, has anyone spoken on Clandis claiming Courtney Love saying Kurt's death wasn't a suicide? She mentioned MK Ultra. Yeah, MK Ultra is a typical sort of, I guess, conspiracy trope, but I've heard that. Candace Owens, for some time, has just been throwing anything out there to pander to the conspiracy crowd. But I've described this in this article. I said, Candace Owens, Pied Piper of Trutherville, that her objective is to get the red pill people into the J pill. Take these conspiracy theorists, flatter them. Oh, you guys are so insightful. You had a point. You saw through this. By the way, Israel controls the world. So what they do is they use red pill as a bridge. And having looked at all of the red pill issues and positions, it turns out that the entire red pill community is in fact a subset of the J pill. It's all woke right by default. It's woke. And by woke, I mean to be woke is you see the world as it really is, and it's oppressive. And there's these hidden group of oppressors, and you need to wake up the people who aren't awake so you can fight it because everybody's asleep. That's why you're woke. So if you're on the left, woke means you recognize systemic racism as the universal oppressor, and the West is the oppressor of people, the poor, and of Earth itself. But then if you're on the right, you're looking at a different oppressor, because from the left, white's the enemy. So the white nationalist right, their oppressor is Jews. And they both believe that they have equal claims of being oppressed, of being aggrieved, and they each want to expose this universal scapegoat. But the woke part of it means that the instant you become aware of this essential dynamic in society, oppressed and oppressor, you're awake, and now everything you see in the world must be looked at through that filter. So if you look at everything from the woke left filter, you see racists everywhere, oppression everywhere. If you look at everything from the woke right perspective or red pill, you see either Israel's behind everything, or the deep state, or the secret government, or a conspiracy. But both of these imply that you have a new frame of reference through which to see the world. I would say also that woke right and woke left are steam valves for the people who aren't held in check by the mainstream. If the blue pill Normieville dream doesn't pacify you, they got something harder, don't worry. And if you veer left politically, you'll find yourself in Woketown, big old echo chamber. If you veer right, you'll find yourself in Trutherville. You'll have some of the Kool-Aid at Alex Jonestown. You might go down Q Street. And if you stick around long enough, you might find yourself getting recruited into something even harder than the red pill, the J pill. And that's the end of the road. Unless you're willing to go further and you recognize that maybe we shouldn't be taking any pills. Maybe we shouldn't be getting our information secondhand. Maybe we shouldn't be passive recipients of propaganda, like our minds are just open for any kind of deluge of propaganda, but maybe we should be critical thinkers. But there's no platform for that on the world stage. It's a duopoly. If you don't believe in the alt stuff, you don't believe in the mainstream, you have nowhere to go. You can lose yourself in entertainment and sports, but guess what? The entertainment is going to reinforce the world stage dramas and our manufactured history every time. So this is an inescapable echo chamber. You can't get out of the Truman Show. You can't escape the program by following any of its designated pundits or media platforms or even independent investigators. You think Project Veritas is going to get you any closer to the truth, or Laura Loomer? No. The off-world stage perspective is the one that we take here. And this is the perspective that is aware of the structure of media insofar as it manufactures events for mass consumption. Not a conspiracy. It's not even a conspiracy theory to say that mass media globally serves government globally for the purposes of introducing historical events onto our timeline. And the second part of it is these manufactured events are planned so far in advance that it raises significant questions about how much power we actually have. Or are we powerless, confronting a utopian system imposed over us, and we're not aware of it because war is peace. Mind war maintains this status quo, which is what I think. The only platform for a perspective inclusive of news bending and history bending and media fakery, long-term, short-term, and the effects of it is the IPS think tank. And you'll find some channels that are adjacent to us, like Fakeologists, who are also looking at things as skeptics of the world stage, not mainstream people skeptical of conspiracy theories. No, we're looking at this from the off-world stage perspective. We're equally skeptical of the conspiracy theorists and the mainstream. This is not a popular or widespread thing. What we're doing is very singular, very unique. It's unique in the sense that although many people have arrived at various conclusions that align with ours, there isn't the conscious assumption of or adoption of this as a stable platform or philosophical platform. It's relatively new. And we're just getting started. And we are in the process of imposing MSM minus standards over the MSM plus subset of the mainstream. In other words, we're at the point where it's useful now to debate the merits of conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory, which is why my focuses have been on Candace Owens. There are plenty of other people worth focusing on, but she's the one right now who really epitomizes controlled opposition. We talked about JFK, the concurrent programming, John Frankenheimer, Jackie Kennedy's home movie. And then we got into Robert Kennedy's death. Again, Stanley Kubrick, Frankenheimer, metascriptors. This is not a new structure. It wasn't like media was seized by the deep state or whatever 20 years ago. No, media has always served the purpose of supplanting and replacing religion as the primary curator of our worldview. It's a worldview monopoly. I call it the new monotheism. And we're provided with numerous God constructs, eschatologies. We've got an entire worldview handed to us that everybody fits into no matter what their religion. Space has pretty much replaced heaven as a new iteration of this older concept. Nothing new under the sun, as they say. Anyway, thanks for the calls. Thanks for the comments. We'll see you all tomorrow, and I'll see you in Discord.